Okay, welcome everyone to ANC 34G's regular fourth Monday meeting in March. We're again meeting virtually as we have been since last April. I'm Randy Speck. I'm the chair of ANC 34G, and I represent the single member district 34G 03, and that's basically the area between Nebraska and Nevada and Broad Branch. Let's begin by introducing the other commissioners. Connie, you want to go next?
Sure. Hello, my name is Connie Chang, and I represent District 5, which is east on Connecticut, going toward Broad Branch Road with Nevada and Chevy Chase Parkway down to Kanawha. So it's a little bit like a dreidel. Thank you so much.
Peter?
My name is Peter Gosselin. I represent a district that runs on the north side, the Western Avenue border with Maryland to the Circle, heading south along Connecticut, the western side of Connecticut to Military, back to 41st with a peninsula to the east of Connecticut. And I have most of the businesses on Connecticut. I represent most of the businesses on Connecticut and most of the large apartment buildings.
No.
Chris?
Chris Frombaluti, I represent District 7, which is bounded by Military, Reno, Nevada, and Nebraska, and it's the southernmost district in our ANC.
And Lisa?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Lisa Gore, and I represent Single Member District 01, which is Hawthorne and Barnaby Woods, so Western Avenue to Oregon, to Beach Street, then back up over towards Western, and just forgot the name of that street. a little past Pinehurst Circle, and back around towards Beach Drive.
John?
I'm John Higgins. I am the commissioner for Area 2, which is east to west, Oregon Avenue to Utah, and north to south from Nebraska to past Moreland to Beach.
And Michael?
My single member district is 04. That is Morrison to Tennyson and Broad Branch to Utah. It encompasses the Lafayette Elementary School and Park area.
Okay, great. We have 7 commissioners, so we have a quorum. I think, in fact, we've had perfect attendance to all of our meetings thus far, which is great. I want to welcome everyone to our meeting. We're going to be covering a number of varied topics tonight. We want to have as much participation by the community as we can while we're operating on a Zoom platform. That's going to mean that basically the commissioners will have audio and video all of the time. And if we want to hear from some of the attendees, you can raise your hand, use the raise hand function, or put any questions you have in the Q&A or comments in the chat. And if you want to be recognized, then Lisa Gore, who is the secretary of the commission, will be monitoring that, and she will be able to make you a panelist and give you audio and visual so that you can participate as well. And all of our meetings are recorded, so we will be posting them on the various listservs after the meeting, probably sometime tomorrow. And as I said, if you put something in the Q&A or in the chat, we're keeping a record of those, so we will have those for our reference later, and if questions need to be answered that we didn't answer during the meeting, we'll try to get back and answer those. Okay, the first order of business is to adopt an agenda for our meeting. Our agendas have been posted on the various listservs and on our website. Are there any modifications or changes anyone has to the agenda? Okay, I move that we adopt it. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, raise your hand. 7-0. Okay, thank you very much. We'll move on to commissioner announcements, and I do have several. And I'm going to do it a little bit differently today. After I finish making the announcements, I will post them in the chat so that you'll have some of the links to the various events that are going to be going on, since there are several and some of them are coming up pretty rapidly. The first is a roundtable on post-pandemic transportation, and beginning at noon on tomorrow, March 23rd, the Council's Committee on Transportation and the Environment will hold a roundtable to hear from the community and from the District Department of Transportation about what transportation initiatives that began during the pandemic should continue. And the topics of discussion will include streeteries, which you may recall is the use of some streets for restaurants to have outdoor dining, bus-only lanes, slow streets, which we had long discussion about in the early part of the fall, and whether to ask the National Park Service to permanently close Beach Drive to cars. And that's been a topic of a lot of discussion on the listservs. The committee invites the public to testify or to submit written testimony, which can be made part of the official record. Anyone wishing to testify, and I think it's probably too late to actually testify live at tomorrow's hearing, but you can send your testimony to abenjamin@dccouncil.us, and I'll put that again in the chat. The record doesn't close until April 6th, so anyone who wants to contribute something to that discussion can send a written testimony before April 6th. Second, Congresswoman Norton is meeting with the National Park Service. She's hosting this joint meeting with the Park Service on March 25th, Thursday at 7 p.m. And I've been to these meetings that she has with the Park Service before, and it's a really good opportunity to talk directly to the superintendent of Rock Creek Park, Julia Washburn, who's a very good and helpful person, and raise any questions then that you might have with regard to the National Park Service, including, for instance, the status of Beach Drive after the pandemic. That would be a perfect opportunity to raise that issue if you wish. And for that, you need to email Councilwoman Norton's office, and I'll put the email address in the chat. You need RSVP to that, and then she will send you a Zoom link. Another meeting coming up is the Connecticut Avenue reversible lane study, and there'll be a public meeting, two public meetings actually, on March 30th, Tuesday, March 30th, from 9:30 in the morning until noon, and on Thursday, April 1st, from 6 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. And the same information is going to be provided on both of those days. And there's information I will put in the chat about how you can sign up to do that. You'll recall that there was also a presentation that was made to the ANC. I don't remember the exact date, but that they're going to cover much the same ground, I suspect, that they covered with the ANC. And finally, the rehabilitation of Broad Branch Road final environmental assessment has been completed and posted. DDOT and the Federal Highway Administration, in cooperation with the National Park Service, has issued this environmental assessment, and they concluded that there's no adverse environmental impact. And this is very similar, I think it's almost identical to the environmental assessment that was presented to the ANC at its November 9th, 2020 meeting. And I'll have a link where you can watch the video of that discussion if you'd like. The big takeaway from that is that they have concluded, I guess finally now, that the Broad Branch rehabilitation will include a pedestrian walkway, but it will not include a bike path. And that was something that our ANC and several other ANCs had advocated for pretty aggressively. Okay, any other commissioners have announcements they'd like to make? Lisa?
Just one announcement that the period for volunteers or request participation to volunteer in the Standing Committee on Racial and Social Equity closed yesterday. So we do have a final list of people that are interested in serving on that committee. We will have an interest meeting just to kind of introduce you to the committee and some of the things that we might try to tackle on April 8th at 7:00 p.m. So I'll be shooting that link to everyone that signed up, and I think we have about 19 folks thus far, as well as the commissioners who will be serving as ex officio. Thank you.
Okay, I am having trouble putting my chat up, but Connie?
Yes, I just want to make an announcement that on Saturday, which was the first day of spring, I joined many volunteers across the district to participate in the Clean City DC. So 34G05, some volunteers came and we cleaned up some streets, Nevada, Broad Ranch Road, Northampton, and it was kind of fun actually, just to see that, you know, not that fun cleaning itself, but it was very fun looking and seeing that it was cleaned. And so I will have further opportunities for teens also to come, because you can earn volunteer community service hours. I will write that letter for you, and I encourage you to come and join me. And I encourage any other commissioners, if we want to do it together, we could just set up a date and we can just kind of go across our ANC. The other announcement I'd like to make, or rather a statement, is the last week has been particularly hard on Asian American and Pacific Islanders, the AAPI community, with the murders in Atlanta, Georgia. And many of us who are Asian American, also friends of Asian Americans, or we have kids who are Asian American, have really felt a lot of, I would say, sadness and fear, and also I don't want to say anger, but something like that. I mean, strong emotions. And so I wanted to say that I stand in solidarity with all the organizations that have put out statements, and other ANC commissioners who've done so. I've signed a statement myself. And I just want to say that, you know, we see you, and please don't stay silent. And DHS has a reporting feature that I guess I could also put in the chat, and you can report any incidences. That's all I have.
Thank you, Connie, for that important announcement. Anyone else have announcements? Okay, are there any community announcements? Emir has his hand up. Lisa, can you admit Emir?
Yep. Randy, I don't think you made me host. Randy, did we lose you?
I'm here. I was trying to go off and see if I could make that post to the, okay, just one second. Oops. Sorry. All right, you should be.
There you go.
All right, sorry about that.
That's okay. Okay, Amir, stand by.
Hello, can everyone hear me? All right. So my name is Amir Gur-Ravantab. I am one half of the Ward 3 Mokers. Thank you for having me today, commissioners. So I'm just going to provide a quick update from the city. Mokers were not present for last meeting in March, so this might cover a bit of some common ground. But we're going to go over some new vaccine updates and restriction updates. But before that, a few items of housework. Today, the congressional hearing on DC statehood took place, and that was attended by Mayor Muriel Bowser and several members of the DC Council. And if you're interested in seeing some strong points in favor of DC statehood, I recommend watching that congressional hearing. Additionally, the mayor's office would like to hear about the opinions of residents on a few of our infrastructure projects, including the small area plan, the reversible lane study, and proposals to change zoning and density within our ward. So if anyone has their opinions to share, please contact me. Now, moving on to the vaccine update. As of last week, we've had 14% of DC residents who have received at least one dose of the vaccine. By now, it's probably a bit higher than that. We're getting about 24,000 vaccine doses every week, and invitations are continued to be sent out from the pre-registration system on coronavirus.dc.gov every Thursday by 10 a.m., Sundays by 10 a.m., and Tuesdays by 10 a.m. if there are remaining appointments. And the breakdown for those invitations are 20% of them are eligible essential workers. 40% of them are DC residents 18 to 64 with medical conditions, and 40% are DC residents age 65 plus. We have a question. What is MOKERS? MOKERS is the Mayor's Office of Community Relations and Services. It's a community liaison position within the Mayor's office, and there's 2 per ward. I represent Ward 3, but since this ANC is between Ward 3 and 4, Ward 3 and 4 MOKERS attend these meetings. So moving on, we're adding new classes of eligible essential workers every week to be receiving the vaccine. So last Monday, we added court workers, transit workers, food service, postal workers, local government employees, public utility employees, other health and outreach employees who weren't included before, and property maintenance workers. On March 29th, we're going to add non-public transit employees, so that includes rideshare and taxis. We're going to add delivery, logistics, courier workers, and essential mass media employees. And when they say essential, that means anyone who has a considerable level of contact with the public who's outside. So does not include those who entirely work from home. And moving on, April 12th, they're going to add higher education workers, so university professors and staff, construction workers, essential IT workers, federal government agency workers, and property managers. And on May 1st, we're going to finally enter phase 2 of the vaccination plan, which is when DC residents age 16 and up will be eligible to receive the vaccine. And if there are any questions from the public or commissioners, I can take them now.
Questions, commissioners? Okay, thank you, Amir. Connie, you got a question?
I think you have a question
Yes.
from Commissioner Chang.
Yes, I do have a question. Amir, can you let the public know, there's been questions about DC having like a lower rate of vaccination?
Oh,
and
yeah.
I just wanted you to make a few points about that.
I can explain that. So yeah, we are statistically at the bottom of per capita vaccination rates. And the reason for that is because DC is vaccinating essential workers, which every state is doing. But because of the nature of DC, we have a lot of people who work in DC who don't live in DC. Actually, the majority of those kind of workers who do the essential work, including healthcare workers, the majority of healthcare workers who are essential are not living in DC, includes food service. Most of these essential workers are DC workers, but not DC residents. So they're getting counted as whatever state they're living in, which isn't DC. So it's adding to their per capita numbers and not to our per capita numbers, which is why we do have a much lower per capita rate. But it is important that we do vaccinate those people as they're coming into DC every day. And it doesn't matter whether they're in a different border just a few miles away. They're here every day. They're part of our daily population. And the district health has decided that it's a priority for them to be vaccinated. But we're also still focusing, of course, on DC residents. That's why the breakdowns were 40% for DC residents and 20% for essential workers. So the new pre-registration system is trying to make it more equitable, among other things. And I want to add that the pre-registration system is still maintaining the priority zip code that it has before. And the way they're doing that is half of those breakdowns are being sent to priority zip codes, which are in wards 5, 7, and 8. So for our purposes, wards 3 and 4, it's 10% essential workers, 20% 64 and under with medical conditions, and 20% with 65 and up.
Thank you.
Emir, do we know when everyone is going to be eligible? The president has talked about May 1st, when everyone would become eligible.
Well, right now you can pre-register. Anyone can pre-register right now, but they're starting to roll out May 1st. That is when phase 2 begins, and phase 2 is 16 and up, everyone, the general public. So that's the date that Mayor Bowser has put forth, is May 1st. And of course, as before, because there was a little bit of a gray area for those age 16 and 17, they're going to receive theirs through Children's Hospital.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, commissioners.
Thank you, Amir.
Thank you.
All right. Any other announcements from anyone? Okay, we can move on to the substantive part of the agenda. And the first item is a presentation and discussion of surveillance, transparency, and accountability. Commissioner Gore, I believe is one of your constituents who raised this issue originally, and you're going to lead the discussion. Thank you.
Okay, hang on 1 minute. If Rachel Levinson and anyone in her office, please raise your hands so I could find you. Rachel, I just got you. Hi, Rachel.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great.
Is there anyone with you? Or are you going to be presenting by yourself?
Just me. Yep.
Okay. And Randy, we're going to need to make her co-host because she has a presentation, so she'll need to share her screen. But just to introduce everyone to this topic, Rachel is a constituent of mine, and she was the first one to reach out to me with something for the agenda. So I'm really happy she's here. It's a topic that I actually know quite a bit about from my previous employment position. And it's the oversight of police technology. So basically surveillance technology. And Rachel, I've looked at a lot of the information that the Brennan Center, who she's affiliated with, has put together on this topic. I think it's extremely important. It's an area that other cities have looked at. On the federal side, we do send up some reports in terms of our use of surveillance. But she and the Brennan Center are really focusing on public input into this process and oversight from a front end perspective, as well as a continuing perspective, to make sure that the civil liberties and civil rights of communities that have a typically can be trampled on by surveillance technology is protected. So with that, I will let Rachel go into her presentation, and then we will take questions from commissioners and the audience, and we'll go from there. So Rachel?
Great. Thank you so much, Lisa. And thank you so much, commissioners, for having me. I was really fortunate to have a great conversation with Lisa last winter, I guess, soon after the election, and was really gratified to find that, as Lisa said, this really is an issue near and dear to her heart, and one where she brought a lot of really interesting expertise and background. So we're able to talk through a bunch of interesting issues that arise out of this. Before I get into my presentation, let me just sort of, add on a little bit in terms of the introduction. So I'm a member of Lisa's district. I live on 32nd Street Northwest, just on the other side of Utah, so right in Barnaby Woods. Both of my children are at Lafayette. We've lived in this area for about 6.5 years now. And before this, lived in Kalorama, Adams, Oregon for about 10 years. Although I think I've left a year off one of those. I think we've lived in this neighborhood for 7.5 years because we've been in DC for about 18 years now. And as Lisa said, I am at the Brennan Center for Justice. I'm Deputy Director of our Liberty and National Security Program. And just by way of very quick background for anyone who's not familiar with the Brennan Center, the Brennan Center is about 25 years old. It's actually based in New York. It's affiliated with NYU Law School. I'm at our DC office. Across the Brennan Center, we work on a bunch of different issues, kind of all dedicated to shoring up the systems of democracy. So that runs the gamut from voting rights to campaign finance reform, to independent judiciary, to ending mass incarceration, to, in my program, liberty and national security, a bunch of different issues. But what I'd sort of boil it down to is ensuring that the balance of power between the people and the government is sort of appropriately calibrated. And that is very much related to what I'm going to be talking about today. So I'm going to share my screen now, which hopefully will work. I'm going to pull up a PowerPoint presentation so that we can just sort of walk through some of the aspects of this bill and why we, and especially the Community Oversight of Surveillance Coalition in DC, think this is a really important bill for the ANC and the council to be taking up. Hold on just a moment. Let's see if I can get this right. And for some reason, sorry, give me a moment. For some reason, I am not actually seeing my PowerPoint here. So let me just close out of one thing. Apologies. All right, let me try this once more. I'm sorry, this is very strange. Hold on, I'm pulling back up. I actually just tested this out just before and was able to pull up. I assume there's not anything. Here we go. Okay, got it. Apologies for that. Apparently a year into the pandemic, still working on my own expertise with Zoom and screen sharing. You would think I have it down by now. All right, let's jump in. There we go. Okay, so as I said, the bill overall is about community oversight of surveillance. And what you can see here is all of the different organizations that are members of this coalition based in DC. I won't walk through all of them, but you can see if you sort of scan through is that these are groups representing a lot of different constituencies, different communities, and different areas of expertise who all came together, really sort of united behind this principle that community oversight over surveillance is a really important kind of mission and goal. So what's the problem here that we're trying to solve? Basically, there's a lot of funding that local law enforcement receives to purchase and operate surveillance technologies. Obviously, that funding can be really important, right, for law enforcement agencies, which is all of them that are kind of, balancing budgets, trying to figure out where funding is coming from. But the issue is that there's often very little oversight over the purchase and use of those technologies. And they're often sort of purchased and rolled out under the guise of public safety, but can have a lot of consequences beyond that, including impact on vulnerable communities and overuse and misuse. So sort of a very brief surveillance tech 101. This is just sort of a quick rundown of a lot of the kinds of surveillance technologies that we see in local law enforcement that can raise a whole variety of issues. So from stingrays, which are devices that can locate where a particular cell phone is or sort of show the phone number for a cell phone, to automatic license plate readers, biometric surveillance, which can be facial recognition and a bunch of other kinds of technologies. Obviously, body-worn cameras are a kind of surveillance technology, although they perform many other functions. Social media monitoring software, in sort of the rollout of smart cities, there can be things like surveillance-enabled light bulbs, stuff like that. So a pretty big range of kinds of technologies that are or could be in the hands of law enforcement. I mentioned briefly sort of what are some of the issues. So one is that as with any kind of policing effort, there can be a disproportionate impact of these surveillance technologies on marginalized communities. So that can be Muslim communities, African-American communities in poverty, immigrants, activists, often sort of disproportionately feel the impact of the use of these kinds of tools. And as you can see, this isn't just sort of, a hypothetical, well, these could have a disparate impact. We know this has happened across the country, sort of time and time again, that unfortunately these tools have had disparate impacts for, you can see on African-American men, on poor communities, on immigrants. And we've sort of seen this, I think especially in the last few years, but even going back, we have seen this sort of as a steady pattern, even when certainly that's not sort of the purpose for which a tool is bought, that often ends up being one of the impacts. So one of the things that happens is that agencies, decide on tools that they want to acquire, they get funding for them. Sometimes there's funding for very particular kinds of technologies, and often with little oversight by community members or elected officials like a city council. So we know that MPD uses facial recognition technology, shot spotter, which in case people aren't familiar with it, the idea is that it detects a gunshot and basically sort of triangulates where it happens, right? So that officers can respond to that location. Stingrays, which again are these cell phone location devices, and body-worn cameras. What we don't necessarily know enough about is details about procurement, about cost, about data retention. That can be a big issue. It may be reasonable for tools to be collecting particular kinds of data, but then we don't necessarily know, both for data retention and data sharing, how long is it kept? What are the circumstances under which it's kept? When can somebody else, either somebody within the agency or outside the agency, access that data? And then under what circumstances is it shared with other agencies? And that could be it could be other local law enforcement agencies, it could be federal agencies, or it could even be other city agencies, right? Data that's maybe getting shared from, a police department to a housing agency, something like that. And again, this is an area where we don't have to sort of raise these as hypotheticals. These, again, are issues that are coming up not just across the country, but in DC, right? So when it comes to stingrays, when it comes to pole-mounted cameras, to smart street lights, sort of all of these things, there have been pretty significant questions that have been raised by sort of a range of outlets. So again, going back to the process in DC, basically the council gets the information that an agency provides. So agencies sometimes report federal grants to buy particular technologies, but it's not a mandate. They're not required to do that. And the council does have to sign off on procurements that are above kind of a certain dollar threshold, but it doesn't involve reviewing the details of the proposed contract. So they're not, as it stands, they're not necessarily going to be looking at these questions of, well, how is this data retained? Or if it's a contract with a third-party provider, that provider also keeping the data? Are they going to claim, for instance, when it comes to a public records request, are they going to claim, well, this is a trade secret, or there's some reason that we aren't going to reveal this to the public? And so part of it is sort of getting into that nitty-gritty so that there is real and robust oversight over how these tools are used and how the data is used. So that's where this proposed legislation comes in. So the shorthand for it is CCOPS. This is a bill that comes from the ACLU, and the ACLU has sort of rolled this out and proposed it. And one of the things we'll be getting to is that it's been passed in multiple jurisdictions across the country. So CCOPS is for community control of police surveillance. And the idea is that it implements a process by which city councils can learn about and then go through an approval process for deployment of surveillance technologies. So as of just a few months ago, there were at least 25 municipal governments across the country that had passed ordinances that were based on these CCOPS legislation. And the legislation sometimes is tweaked in different ways for different localities. So we actually, the Brennan Center was very involved in getting similar legislation passed in New York City. The structure in New York is a little bit different because the city council doesn't actually have approval and disapproval authority over what the police department does. So there it is really truly and solely kind of a transparency initiative. The idea is that the police department at least has to reveal what it's buying and for what purposes. In a lot of other jurisdictions, including DC, there can be more sort of direct oversight. But so this is model legislation that's adapted. And here we can see for, I think we don't have the specific cities, but I think one of the nice things is that, so you can see here that right now, primarily the jurisdictions that have passed this kind of legislation are in California and Massachusetts, along with New York. And I think in some ways this puts DC in a really nice position that it's not the first jurisdiction to try this. It's being tested in other places. There's really, starting to be some robust information about the ways in which this elevates community involvement and council involvement. And at the same time, it means that DC can be a leader and can really show that even a significant city can implement one of these bills and really have it add to both community and legislative input into this. So sort of getting into the details of what the bill does. So it creates a public process that all DC agencies would go through in order to buy and use surveillance technology or data. So there would be a DC council hearing and a vote on whether surveillance technology could be used by a DC agency. And the bill also provides ongoing transparency into how that technology would be used, and also sort of looking back to concerns about disparate impact, information about what disparate impact, if any, there is on particular groups. So we'll take just a minute to walk through an example to sort of show how this would work if it were passed. So say the MPD wanted to purchase what's usually referred to in shorthand as a Celebrate. So it's a mobile device forensics tool. And what that really means is a tool that if it's attached to a cell phone can download all of the information from that cell phone, just kind of pull it out wholesale. So we don't know specifically whether MPD uses Celebrate tools, but we do know that thousands of law enforcement agencies across the country do. So it's sort of out there. So the MPD, if it wanted to use a Celebrate, or if it currently was and wanted to continue using Celebrate tools, would draft a proposal for how they want to use the technology and looking at what its potential impacts are likely to be. The MPD would submit the proposal to something called the Surveillance Technology Advisory Committee. And in a moment, I'll get into what that committee looks like. And so then the STAC, the committee, can suggest revisions to the MPD or make recommendations to the council about this proposal. MPD would then submit the proposal to the council. The council would hold a public hearing. So that would be an opportunity for real public input into this, and then would vote on the proposal to purchase and use this tool. So it's not a prohibition. The bill doesn't prohibit the use of any particular tools. It really is sort of a process of input and consideration. And so then if the council voted yes on using the Celebrate tool, MPD would be able to use the tool in the ways that it's outlined in the proposal. MPD would then have to submit annual reports on how it's using the tool, to disclose any complaints from the community, and would again continue on an ongoing basis to assess the effectiveness and impact. So going just for a moment to this Surveillance Technology Advisory Committee that I mentioned. So the idea is that it would be made up of 7 representatives. So it would be 2 representatives who come from organizations with expertise in privacy and technology, 2 representatives who come from communities that are disproportionately impacted by surveillance, 1 person from a DC agency, but not law enforcement, 1 representative from, and part of the idea is that obviously law enforcement has input into this process by virtue of the proposal, the submitting to the council and having an opportunity to present on it. A representative from a racial or criminal justice organization, and a representative from a civil rights or civil liberties organization. And STAC members are appointed by the DC Council. Law enforcement officers and people with financial ties to surveillance companies wouldn't be eligible to serve on the committee because of concerns about conflicts of interest. There'd be STAC meetings that take place at least 4 times a year, if not more often. And in addition to reviewing these surveillance use policies and impact policies that are coming out of agencies, the committee would also produce a periodic public surveillance technology equity impact report. So going again to looking at these equity concerns. So what are the next steps and what are we asking the ANC to do? The major thing, or the first thing at least, is to pass a resolution. I shared the text of sort of a model resolution or draft resolution with Lisa, although obviously the commissioners should feel free to adjust the language as they think is appropriate. Press for a DC Council hearing. So the coalition that I'm part of has met with, I believe at this point, all of the council members, certainly a majority of the council members. Councilmember Allen, chairman of the Judiciary Committee, has expressed strong interest in sponsoring the bill. It hasn't yet been introduced. Obviously, get the legislation introduced, and then there's also a community petition that anyone is welcome to sign. And that's sort of the overview. Obviously, I'm happy to field any questions to the extent there's anything that I can't answer. I'm happy to take it back to the coalition and come back to the commission with any answers.
Okay, so at that point, Rachel, great presentation.
Very good. Thank you.
Love it, love it. When I was talking to Rachel, I was telling her, I really do think this is a really good piece of legislation. I do really strongly support it, being on the back end of it now, on the front end as a community member. And I definitely think it's something that DC should really, and our council really strongly consider. It's not something, I was telling Rachel, in the federal system, we had to report certain surveillance activities. So it's nothing that, is out of left field. It's something that part of law enforcement is already doing. We don't have that community oversight piece of it. On the federal system, the oversight is, coming from DOJ. But, I think it's a different way to look at police involvement and community involvement in police activities, and to make sure that there's buy-in and support with some of the things that are going on in our community, especially when we have communities that are really impacted by some of the things that happen in police conduct and the technology that they use. You know, it's a changing time, and we need to start giving the community a voice in this process. So with that, are there any commissioner questions? I see we have one in the Q&A. Randy, then John.
Rachel, excellent presentation. Thank you. Have you spoken with any of the other ANCs in the district, and are any of the other ANCs considering resolutions?
That's a great question. I haven't personally spoken with other ANCs, but I know that members of the coalition have. I would have to find out if I believe other ANCs have passed a resolution, but I don't want to represent that absolutely. I'm happy to circle back with which ANCs are considering the issue and which ones have already passed a resolution.
That would be helpful, just to know
Sure.
what other ANCs are doing.
Absolutely.
And Randy, I told Rachel one of the things I was going to do once we get, you know, hopefully a draft resolution, and hopefully if the commission passes it, and even in the event that, you know, prior to that, I'm going to definitely distribute an email to all the ANCs, because I think this is something that a lot of the commissions would be interested in, and maybe have a presentation. Rachel, I could talk about that with you at a later time. There's an ANC group that comes together. They meet on the same night that we have our commission meeting, but it's a bunch of ANCs from across the district. And I think it would be a really good idea to also present to them. And we could potentially use our process as a model process and get them to join on, in addition to a joint letter. That's something that the ANCs do a lot. So I think that would be very helpful.
That's terrific. That'd be great. I'd be happy to present.
John?
Yeah, Rachel, thanks for that presentation. Does your bill provide any means for citizens to go into court if they feel that they have been harmed by any of the police actions, any kind of legal redress they have? And my second question is, do you work with people like the Electronic Frontier Foundation or EPIC, what is it, the Electronic Privacy Information Center?
Sure. So at the Brennan Center, we work really closely. We often work with both EFF and EPIC. EFF and EPIC aren't members of the coalition. You know, EFF is largely California based. So certainly we and other members of the coalition draw often on EFF's expertise on surveillance technologies. Their resources and their staff are really useful sources of expertise. But because this coalition is DC based, I think that's part of the reason that they're not a member. And same with EPIC. We have often turned to EPIC. As you probably know, EPIC is generally a powerful force on surveillance issues, and they especially do a lot of really good work on FOIA issues, sort of doing public records work generally. And so we've also often benefited from what they've been able to find out, often on a national level, in terms of what FBI is doing, what DHS is doing, things like that. In terms of the bill itself, I don't believe that it provides a private right of action to individuals to go into court. And I can pull out, you know, they can certainly send along the language as it is, although I think we might be waiting for it to get introduced. But I believe as it is, there's not a private right of action.
Okay, thank you.
Michael?
Hi, Rachel. So let me just say at the outset, I'm a huge fan of the Brennan Center. I think you guys do great work. And
Thank you.
Victoria Bassetti and I were just recently guests on Michael Isikoff's podcast talking law enforcement.
Oh, I love it. That's great.
And I like Ariel well enough too.
Well, and you probably saw that somehow he was my Zoom screen.
That's right. That's right. So in respect of this, I want to make clear in my own mind that we're talking principally about MPD, right? Because all the federal law enforcement agencies that operate in DC would be ungoverned by DC council legislation, right?
That's exactly right. Yeah, this would affect
police
MPD. It wouldn't affect the other, whatever it is, 20-something, 30-something agencies. Yeah.
Right. And then do you know how it works if there's joint federal state task force work? Are they then shoehorned into this, or do they get the exemption because they're working under, you know, joint federal task force stuff, which is a lot of what happened. When I was prosecuting here, there was a lot of that federal state task force stuff. Usually the feds carried the lead. I didn't know whether that was sort of a escape hatch for the more serious sort of types of criminal investigations under the legislation.
Yeah, that's a great question. And that has come up, I mean, in a lot of other circumstances, right? That when you have these sort of joint local federal efforts, whether it's through the joint terrorism task forces, the JTTFs, or just other sort of information sharing and resource sharing kind of agreements, right? It's often sort of a way out of these kinds of transparency and accountability mechanisms if it looks like a local law enforcement officer sort of isn't acting in that capacity. I think that could be an issue, because if what we're talking about is the agency itself, is MPD, you know, sort of producing these, you know, sort of these recommendations or these proposals, and then approvals of what MPD itself is doing, that's not necessarily going to affect, you know, an individual officer or a set of officers is part of some kind of joint task force or other joint effort. You know, I think to some extent, that's sort of the nature of things. It's probably heightened in DC because we do have such a sort of richness of federal forces and federal information sharing. But I think the idea is that this would at least sort of provide a way in, you know, a lot of people, the sort of the day-to-day interactions that they're going to have with law enforcement are going to be with MPD, right? We know, obviously, we saw over the summer that there were a lot more agencies involved in that. Certainly, if you're on sort of federal ground, if you're part of a protest around the Capitol, something like that, you're certainly going to intersect, you know, going to intersect with Park Service, with Capitol Police, things like that. But that in terms of so many day-to-day interactions, still we're talking about MPD officers. And so being able to at least build some structure and kind of understanding around what tools are in the hands of the MPD and how they're being used would at least be a pretty significant first step.
You know, for sure. I just was, and the basic day in and day out life of citizens in DC are direct interface with MPD. And so if there was something like this, it would be a good governor on some of the behaviors. I was just curious more about how it works on the broad.
That's a good question.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Just to kind of piggyback on that too, I think this proposes to capture that procurement piece in addition to usage. And I think that is a really important part, because you'll be seeing and getting some oversight on actually what they procure, which is part and parcel with what they're going to use and what they'll probably use with other agencies. But that'll give us a really good piece of the oversight puzzle. But I do agree, Michael. I mean, there's, you know, you're going to run into that. But I think having that procurement piece structured in there is really important.
Yeah,
to capture that up front.
Right. I agree with that. I would add, though, too, that at least when I was in charge of the assets forfeiture office in the Justice Department, we gave through the assets forfeiture program a lot of stuff to state and local police, which wouldn't get captured in procurement data, but was still a big source of equipment for law enforcement. So one might want to think about whether distributions under the assets forfeiture program is somehow able to be, the data on that is able to be brought into what you're trying to look for here too.
So crucial. I am so glad you brought that up, Rachel. That is, yeah. If you guys haven't looked at that, federal law enforcement and other agencies swap equipment all the time. So that's a really good point, Michael.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And it does tie in, you know, we've looked at things like the 1033 program, right, where there's sort of sharing of kind of former military equipment, and certainly asset forfeiture, and our justice program has done some work on that. So I completely agree. This is part of sort of a larger ecosystem. It's a great point.
Any more commissioner questions? Okay, Rachel, we have a few in the chat. I don't know if you could see them. The first one is from Kevin. And he asked, why wouldn't the mayor appoint the staff members with advice and consent of the council?
Sure, thanks. And hi, Kevin. Kevin is a good friend. I will be honest that I don't know the answer to that question, and I'm happy to circle back to find out and circle back. I don't know if that's something that is sort of specific to DC or has been part of the larger CCOPS discussions. It may be sort of a sense that the council ultimately, are the ones who are going to sort of be interacting with the stack and be getting sort of the advice function of the stack. And so they should be appointing, but to be honest, I don't know, and I'm happy to find out and come back.
And you see the questions from Ronald?
I do. So would the scope of the staff only apply to DC police surveillance technology? It's actually DC agencies more generally. So our focus has been on the law enforcement aspect of it. And I think in general for this coalition, the focus is on law enforcement technology, but it's not just law enforcement. It's also DC agencies more broadly.
Rachel, wasn't there, I think when I was looking at this across the country, do you recall, and I do not remember the state, incidents where predictive analytics in policing was being used in the school system in terms of the sharing of that data?
The predictive analytics, yeah, where this came up was in Florida.
Lord, I wanted to say Florida. It was very troubling.
It's really fascinating and really troubling. And you're remembering exactly right. Haskell County Sheriff's Office in Florida. There were a couple of big investigative pieces that came out last fall from, I believe, the Tampa Bay Times. And one of them was showing that the sheriff's office was using these predictive tools, and in general, sort of predictive policing programs have been the subject of a lot of concern and a lot of critique, even when what you're talking about is sort of these questions of, well, do we think it's slightly more likely in a particular area that maybe there are going to be, say, armed robberies? That would be sort of a classic use of a predictive policing program. If so, we're going to deploy more police officers to that, square block for some period of time. This sheriff's office was using predictive technologies and pulling in kids' records and looking at them to make judgments about things like who was most likely to be a chronic offender, right? So looking at something that a kid had done as a 15-year-old and saying, basically, it wasn't quite these words, but something along the lines of like, we think this kid is just going to be lost to society. And so they would do things like show up at a parent's door. They were following them. So yes, so it's a really great example. And it was there a sheriff's office that was using the data, but it was being shared out from other agencies. It's a really good example of why you don't necessarily think of surveillance technologies as sort of having a footprint beyond law enforcement, but they really can. And the school system is a great example of where that can come from. And certainly I brought up housing agencies before. Housing agencies are often also a classic example because you think about, things like cameras that are going to be posted, so much information that's collected as part of a function of living in sort of district supported housing or in any city, so much data that's captured generally partly through records, but partly through surveillance technologies that could then potentially be kept, be shared out, be shared with law enforcement agencies. So it is important that these kinds of bills be broader than just looking at the MPD. Yeah.
That was it. Any other questions? And let me check the chat. Okay. Rachel, thank you. And we'll definitely be in touch to keep pressing on this.
Terrific. Well, thank you so much for the invitation to present. I really appreciate it. I'll be circling back on the things that we talked about and happy to field any questions or concerns after this as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is an application for a renewal of a liquor license by Chevy Chase Wine and Spirits. This is a fairly routine process. Every 2 years, the ABRA board has to renew the license for all liquor licenses, and they go on a regular schedule. And this is the first we've seen this year. But Peter, you want to introduce this as a business that's in your SMD?
Lisa, could you raise Malik Singh? I think I see him as Chevy Chase Liquors.
Yep, I got him.
Yeah, good. So Malik, let me just introduce you when you're on and just describe what's happening here. Malik, are you up?
You're muted, Malik.
How you doing?
Good, good.
Are you
Let me
guys
just-
able to see me?
Well, I can see you. You look wonderful.
Thank you very much.
Let me just
That's
talk.
first time I'm using Zoom.
Let me talk through what the license renewal with the commission, and then see if they have some questions for you, and then we'll go by our way. So-
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So this is Chevy Chase Liquors LLC, doing business as Chevy Chase Wine and Spirits. Mr. Singh has owned it for 4.5 years, but it's been in business since, did you say the 1920s or the 1930s?
This business is here from 1937.
From 1937. This is a routine license renewal. You'll see in the document for it that the hours are different than the hours posted at the store. And that raised a question with me. I talked to Sarah Foshbaugh at the Alcoholic Beverage Regulation Administration. She says this is typical doing business. The notion here is if we win another World Series, you know, Mr. Singh.
Actually, honestly, we didn't change any hours. Yeah, it's the same hours. I don't know why these guys send it to you guys, but
Yeah.
anyway, it's good. In that way, I can see you guys too.
So she confirms this, the ABRA official confirms just what Mr. Singh said. So this is a routine license renewal. He has had 2 in the time he's owned the establishment. Do any of the commissioners have any questions for me or for him?
And the location is right next to like Bread and Chocolate and CVS. right?
55,
Yes, sir.
44.
Yeah. I've
In
been there,
between bread and chocolate and CVS.
yeah, I've been there many a time. Nice.
All right. Thanks for your business, sir.
Just soft drinks. No, none of that, none of the alcohol.
Yeah.
No, we have soft drinks with alcohol too.
I know, in the back, I know.
All right, do I hold it? Randy, you're muted.
You want to make a motion, Peter?
Yeah, I move that we.
Just a second, let's make sure that we don't have anybody. Jean Simmons has raised her hand. I don't know
Okay.
whether she has a question. She took her hand down, or someone took their hand down.
No, I don't-
Okay, I'll assume that that's not a request to speak then. Okay, all right, go ahead, Peter.
The proper form is we resolve to endorse this, or we resolve.
Support,
So we-
to support.
So I move that the commission support this application for a license renewal for
Thank
Chevy
you
Chase
very
Wine and Spirits.
Thank
there
you
a
very
second?
much. Really appreciate it.
All that we got to vote.
All those in favor?
Okay, Mr. Singh,
7-0. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you guys. Really appreciate it. Thank you very
Yeah.
much, Peter.
Good.
So nice of you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mass. Thank you very much.
Okay, the next item is a brief report on the small area plan process and the progress that's being made there. And Peter and Connie are both on the advisory committee for the small area plan, and I'll let them summarize where we stand and what's going on now.
You want to go first, Connie?
I can, or you can, Peter, it's fine. Or we could just jump in. We had our the public kickoff meeting that OP held, because they are in charge of this small area plan, and that was on March 4th. And we heard that, well, we were there, but we also heard that the count of attendees was close to almost 400. It was 300 plus. And there was a lot of IT difficulties and a long stream of chats with questions, and then questions that were not all answered because there were so many people on that chat line. And when we had our second Chevy Chase Small Area Plan Community Advisory Committee meeting scheduled for March 16th, we heard from Erkin Eric and Osberg, that they took note of this and that they have added more targeted engagements with virtual kind of ask a planner events, 4 in total, 2 hours each, smaller engagements with the community for people to show up virtually to ask questions, as well as 4 more that's in person. And that OP is going to take advantage of some public meetings like Chevy Chase Art. Will be having an exhibit on April 18th, and OP expects to be there so that anyone who's also looking at the exhibit outdoors will be able to speak to a planner. And they also stated that they will issue one-pagers on topics that have continued to come up through the chat from that meeting, as well as on their website, publicinput.com/Chevy Chase, where people have asked a lot of questions. And so they're working on that. They are also going to provide a video. They said this was something that was brought up by myself and some other people, where they're answering the questions that everyone has questions about, like, how does this work with the comp plan? What does this mean if someone were to ask for a zoning exemption or exception? What does that mean if the small area plan is still in process? And so those questions were answered at the CAC meeting, but to the members, but we encouraged OP to answer it to the community at large via video, and they were already in process of doing that. Part of the timeline that they provided us, I hope will be shared very soon, where all of these activities are on a timeline. On that timeline, they, I believe, have heard from a lot of us that a design charrette is necessary. Peter, we could all talk about that. This is something that's important to the community because people have a hard time seeing what they are envisioning. And so they will have that process in place. And they also told us that they have hired a facilitator, a professional facilitator from LINK Link. It's an organization that they have engaged in other small area plans, and they're engaged in current ones outside of just our own. But we don't have much detail. And so that's something that we're going to probably ask for. Anything else, Peter, that I've forgotten? It seems like the timeline is stretched a little longer than just September, October. It seems like they're going a little bit closer to December, but we really didn't discuss that. And other things that came up were a proposal to try to engage the community a little bit in parallel, really, with OP's activity. And other CAC members were very interested, and they kind of raised their hand and said, we would love to support something like that, hold a webinar on these topics that seem to confound some community members, or to just dig in more deeply. And so I think that will continue. And the other thing we also talked about were the visioning survey questions. And OP was very open in allowing members to just look at the questions and have input on those questions, because we all know that how you ask the question can deliver a results that you may or may not even expect or have planned for. And so the members that are on there are going to be engaged in that effort. OP did also report that one member who was originally on the committee decided to exit because of some on social media, the dislike of having members that don't live in DC or in our area. And this person was representing an organization, but this person lived outside of DC. And I believe there was only that one person. Peter, would you like to add? I feel like you want to jump in. Yes.
Let me just say very few things. First of all, I'm very appreciative of Connie's and Randy's voice in this. Randy, at a meeting with some of the people in the Community Advisory Committee and the OP last week, made very clear to OP how skeptical this community is, how distrustful this community is of OP, and how OP needed to take that into account. In addition, I am aware, I can see that OP in its way is trying to respond. I've said from a long time, we need many more meetings. We need an independent professional facilitator. We need to extend the timeline. The problem is this: instead of engaging with us and having us And us could mean the ANC, us could mean the community, some group, independent group in the community, the Chevy Chase Citizens Association, be involved in decisions like interviewing the facilitator. OP hears these murmurings, these complaints, this agitation in the community, and then they do something and they present it to us as a fait accompli. And I think that without going into further detail, I think that this ANC needs to meet and have a full discussion. I just think this is a very, very rocky start to something that is vitally important to this community. And unless we engage in a fuller way as an ANC,
Glad I'm on the commission.
that we're going to find ourselves blamed for a process that doesn't do what people thought they were promised, which is a full democratic conversation about the future of the community. We can't do it here tonight, but I do, I actually, and I know that my fellow commissioners are really, really tired only 3 months in, but I wonder whether we need a special meeting. I just raised the subject because I do think we need a full conversation. And in addition, Connie has a proposal about a sidecar education agenda, and all of these things need to be discussed fully and acted on together. And I think we need to take the reins on this one.
Let me just add one other thing, because there was a hearing on Thursday Peter testified at the oversight hearing for the Office of Planning. And one of the things that I thought was particularly interesting was that in the colloquy between the chairman and the director of OP, there was some discussion about the length of the time of this small area plan and whether it would end at the end of September when the fiscal year ends. And the director was saying that that's what their budget says. They have to commit the money by the end of September. But the chairman made it quite clear that the council can give them more money in next year. And so it can be extended beyond the end of September. And if there's a need to do that, we should certainly raise that with the council. Budget hearings are coming up for Office of Planning in late April or early May. And we should be prepared to do that if we think that they're going to need some more money.
Okay, can I just say one other thing in the spirit of full disclosure? In the wake of that testimony, which, just so the other commissioners know, was me testifying on my own behalf, I simply missed I missed the deadline for getting stuff into us, so getting anything approved. Andrew Trueblood, who's the director of the Office of Planning, has reached out and wants to talk to me. I'm going to talk to him tomorrow. Again, I'm going to talk on my own behalf or as a representative of the CAC, not this commission. But all of this goes to the point that I think we really need to get even more involved than we already are. So I think that's where we stand right now.
Okay, there's one question in the Q&A. How will OP inform residents about these meetings and the distribution of information?
Well,
Go
ahead.
So OP has been continuing to encourage people to go to that website. So that website, actually, if you haven't seen it, again, they've updated it a little bit more. There's questions on there right on that first page. And so they're trying to, I think, have everyone kind of funnel everything there and not separately all over the place. And so they should be reporting out on anything that was given to us as CAC members, and I will encourage them to do so, to post it on that website so that anyone could have access to that. I think it's important, and especially their new timeline and the dates and so forth. People need to mark it on their calendar and be prepared and know that they can go, and that's important.
One other question, who the SAP member was who resigned? I don't know whether you can say that or not, but.
Well, she was on the original list, I believe. Is that correct, Peter? I think it was just the names were all listed with the organization originally on the website, I believe. It's just not contact information, like personal information or whatever. And so
it was a chart person. I can't remember who it was.
Yeah, I believe it was the chart person. Chrissy Little. Yeah, she did not
Okay.
live here in DC, in Chevy Chase, DC, but she was representing the organization, and she'll still stay involved, I think, informally, probably. I haven't spoken to her, but that was the report.
Okay, Michael?
Just one quick question. I haven't been to the OP website in a little while, but the last time I went there, I found it not to be as user-friendly as one would hope.
Yeah.
And what I'm wondering is whether or not there will be a separate sort of icon or something set up specifically and exclusively for this stuff, so that people don't get frustrated with the OP website and give up, because I think
It's not the OP website. It's not an OP website at all. It's a dedicated website to just this issue.
Yeah, it's publicinput.com/Chevy Chase, and it's
okay. Sorry, then we
Yeah.
should. I'm sorry, that just speaks to. I'm a
I'll just
commissioner.
write
It
it down.
speaks to my lack of understanding of where to find stuff. So I think we need. This is part of, Connie, what you're, I think, endeavoring is that we have to be more leading on how people can get engaged.
Yes.
Can I just, to
and I
your
think
point,
it's important.
to your point,
Peter.
Michael, I raised this with the OP people. If you Google Chevy Chase small area plan, you'll end up having to sort of zigzag to get, it doesn't come up easily. So that the sort of thing that a resident who is not steeped in this as much as we're steeped at this point is going to have a hard time getting to it. And I don't know whether there are ways to.
They may have fixed that, Peter, because I did a search today and it came right up.
Let's see, let's try it.
But anyway,
And
we shouldn't
could I
spend more
just-
time on that here,
Well,
though.
I do want to put in a plug, though, for people to please go to our own Facebook. If you're on social media, please go to the ANC 3G Facebook page, because I am regularly putting all of these links and the meetings and resolutions and so forth that's posted on our ANC website. I'm taking the links and posting it on the Facebook page, and it's not, you know, more people are using it because it's more regularly posted, but I encourage you to go there and just take a look so that you have it. And after every meeting, in the comment section, I just post all of these links so that you can go to the public meeting on that day, you go down, and then you can see it in the comments. And I will endeavor to do as much as I can to post these things out for the ANC.
Okay.
Posting that fact on the listservs would probably be helpful too.
Okay.
The fact that you're doing this on the listservs.
Okay.
There's a comment in their question, I guess, in the Q&A.
It just came up again. I just answered one.
There's a couple of them.
Well, it's just a comment. Yeah. There's a question. What is the coordination is occurring with the ANC planning processes across Ward 3? Does anyone want to answer that? I'm not sure that there's.
I think the answer is there is none right now, at least
Yeah.
not from this ANC. We're scrambling just to try to keep up with the roll of events in our own community. It might be wise for us to start doing that, but that's a new venture that I don't think any of us have basically had time for yet.
Okay, we've got a hand up, but we really need to move on. We've got a lot left to cover tonight. So
Janet, you're being promoted. Janet, you can talk now. You're muted.
We can't hear you.
Sorry, that was a mistake. I pressed the wrong button. My
Okay.
apologies.
I was afraid of that. Okay, we do need to move on. If there's anything else people want to put in the Q&A or the chat, we'll try to get to them later, but we really do need to move to the next item. And that's the discussion and possible vote on recommendations by the Task Force on Racism's Housing and Education Work Groups. And commissioners have had a lot of discussions about this issue with the recommendations for 3 or 4 months now. And so I would like to hope that we're going to be able to resolve things and get through it tonight. Lisa, you're going to take the lead, I think, on presenting the motions and discussions, leading the discussion.
Peter's going to do housing and I'm going to do education.
Okay, all right.
So can I ask Randy, how do you want to proceed on this? I can give our proposal as a clean resolution. We started this process as introducing the substance of the task force report, and then Connie was amending it.
Just go to a clean resolution, I think. We discussed this at many meetings before.
Okay.
Everyone's had all of the recommendations available since last November. It's time for us to move ahead. So just give us a clean resolution.
Okay. I move that the commission revisit recommendation 1 of the that we've already enacted, to add language specifying what we mean by affordable. And I move that the language read as follows: that the commission advise the district to build significant dedicated affordable housing and workforce housing with a focus on households earning 50% or less of median family income above the Chevy Chase Community Center and Chevy Chase Library.
Point of order.
Yeah.
So Randy, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think for recommendation number 1, the first thing we need is a motion to take it off the table. Because it's already, that one has already been, so
Okay,
we need a motion to take it
Peter
off.
should make that motion.
And is that the proper phrasing? I move
Yes.
that recommendation 1 as previously passed be taken off the table. Or
Or put back on, I'm sorry.
Put back
Put
on
back
the table. Yeah, okay. Okay.
I second.
Okay.
All those in favor? Michael raised his hand, 7-0.
Okay,
Okay.
7-0, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, now go on, Peter.
Now, I move that we amend the motion now back in dispute, in discussion, to read that the commission advised the district to build significant dedicated affordable housing and workforce housing with a focus on households earning 50% or less of median family income above the Chevy Chase Community Center and Chevy Chase Library. Do I have a second?
A second.
Before we vote, I would propose that because there are interrelated issues here with several of these, that you present all of the motions together as one motion. And that way we can discuss it and then we can vote on it. Is there an objection to that?
Yeah, how could you give me an example of what this interrelationship looks like?
Yeah, there are several of them that now reference the deeply affordable housing. And I think I can do it either way you want, but I've got some, I just think we ought to consider it all together. But if you don't want to do that, that's fine.
Let me offer a suggestion. I take it you have a view on the issue of this approach to affordability.
Not necessarily, no.
I don't think we can combine them with this one.
Okay,
I think we should do this one separate.
Go ahead, however you want to do it. It's your motion.
Okay.
So the motion's on the floor and I properly
It's been seconded.
it. So we're in discussion.
Right. Is there any discussion?
Discussion.
John?
Are we including the 5 key actions or the 4? Yes, the 5 key actions that were in the original proposal.
That's the way I understand the motion.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that.
Maybe I ought to just speak broad.
Yes.
I ought to just say what I think is motivating this approach, the approach that Lisa Gore and I suggest that the commission takes. We have 2 aims here. We've talked a lot about affordable housing, and we have not borne down on what we mean by affordable housing. We understand the goal that, Lisa and I understand the goal that we are suggesting here to be an aspirational one, But it's important that we say what we mean when we're talking about affordability. In addition, we're interested in seeing a lot of the terms of that have been in this one, but more importantly in some of the other ones that we'll talk about shortly, removed, because we don't want to endorse stuff that we don't understand what we're saying when we say it. And we are trying to get as close to plain English in this area as we can get. And in doing so, we hope that these recommendations, the recommendations that we adopt, are broader, allow for a broader look at a broader set of options for pursuing the goals that I think, notwithstanding the amount of discussion we've had and disagreement we've had, we all share.
Okay, I will just make a couple of little comments. First of all, I want to again commend the housing work group. I think they did a fabulous job working over 3 or 4 months last summer to put together a really outstanding report and recommendations. And I don't want anything that we're doing here to detract from what I think was certainly very heartfelt and dedicated work on the part of a lot of people who really believe strongly about these issues. And I think the report and the recommendations have stimulated a lot of very good discussion that has been helpful for the community. And I'm glad that the commission took this action last summer, and I'm glad that the housing group and all the other work groups did a really outstanding job of trying to move us along in this process. And I think the recommendations that are included in this particular recommendation 1, the proposal to make the modification to focus on deeply affordable housing, I think that's a very good thing. And I think it will give us a better focus on the racial equity issues that are the central part of what the work group was focusing on. But for me, now is the time really for us to concentrate the communities and the ANC's efforts on the success of the small area plan. And I think that these recommendations are only the first step, that there's lots of work left to be done. And that's especially true with the recommendations 1 and 2, I think, which go to the small area plan. And so I'm looking forward to the progress that we can make on that. And so I'm supporting the proposed changes. And I'm doing that in order to get us moving forward, because I think that's the most important aspect here. And we've spent several months talking about this, and talk is not going to get us anywhere. So I'm supporting and will vote for this recommendation and the other proposed recommendations changes that Lisa and Peter have put together, and with the help of some of the other commissioners.
Could I just follow up on that?
Certainly.
First of all, I very much appreciate that you're doing this. I understand that it's difficult, given how much work you put into and Connie put into the housing work group effort. I think that housing work, and I know there's a lot of feeling about what we're doing here. I want the work group to recognize first that I appreciate their work, but also that on every one of these issues, the commission is speaking, even if it adopts these resolutions, these versions of the resolution. So your work has not been for naught. You pushed this issue forward, and we have to take it the way we think we can best work with it, and the community can best work with it. But it doesn't mean that we've thrown out your work and replaced it with ours. And I also commend the work group for what they've done over these many months. Can I call the question?
Well, we need to, if there's community, any attendees want to speak.
And let me just speak a little bit on the affordability issue. And I think I definitely owe it to the work group to give them an explanation why this was so important to me. I really wanted the report, and I was actually very adamant about the report, to actually target an affordability level. The district has produced, I won't say significant affordable housing units since 2015, going back maybe as far as 2001. But if you look at that and you really look at where the affordability levels lie overall, they're at the higher income level. And what I mean by that is 80 and 120% AMI. I sent the commission, and what I did, and it was actually after our last discussion, it was something that Michael Zeldin actually said that made me go back and do a lot more digging than I originally did. And one of the things I looked at was the median income for Black families in DC. And it is roughly, I've heard 40,000, 42,000. The data that I saw showed about 45,000 in terms of income level. So when you look at 80% AMI, and I'm looking for my document, 120% AMI, DC's median Black income is nowhere near that. It's in between 30 and the 50% AMI levels. So then you also look at where some of those units are being built, and some of the data shows that affordable units are predominantly in certain wards within the city. We all know that Chevy Chase in Ward 3 has very, very minimal, I think, 450 total. And since 2015, maybe less than 100. So it's really important, especially with this being born out of the task force on racism, to recognize that there remains a lot of work to do in targeting income levels where Black DC residents actually sit. And that is at between that 30 and 50% level. The Housing Production Trust Fund, I think statistically, since 2015 has been making an effort, and this is in DCHD, or Department of Community Development, performance oversight testimony for this year. They have made strides since 2015, I believe, to target those income levels at 50% and 31 to 50%, and to meet those affordability level goals, which I think at that level is 40%, but they are definitely underperforming at 0 to 30%. So there's still a need to really target deeply affordable housing. And I felt, if this was not born out of the task force on racism, maybe we could have left it. But regardless of where this recommendation comes from, I just felt it was extremely important for all of us to really understand the impact of not putting that target in there. We definitely need affordable housing in Chevy Chase. I don't think there's any question about that, hopefully. But we need to also recognize that we need to promote as much diversity in those affordability levels as we possibly can. So that's an issue that's occurring across the city. We're not going to be exempt from it. But I think it does send a different message when we put that specifically and affirmatively state that and support that in our recommendation. And especially coming out of that task force, and then with us starting the Standing Committee on Racial and Social Equity, if we look at this from an equity perspective, we have to ask ourselves, who's being harmed in the process? And is everyone still getting a fair shot in that process? And when you look at the median income level for, DC and Black residents, I would have to say no. So the only way to make sure they get that fair shot, is to make sure those income levels are included in there. And like Peter said, this is an aspirational goal. I know the district, I think we're on the right track because the Department of Housing and Community Development is striving towards that. They're making some progress in those numbers, but at the very deeply affordable level, they need to do better. And that's something that we need to tell them. We need to support, those residents and make sure that we advocate for that deeply affordable housing. You're on mute, Randy.
There appears to be something in the Q&A.
So that kind of
Do you
goes.
want to answer those?
Yeah. So Mary says, why isn't our community supporting those earning incomes of 30% or less of the area median income? That's the group that needs our help. And she's absolutely right. Our language says 50% and below, because that's the target, you know, that we started with. But you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And I think that by us including that range, so we put that range in there, 50% and less. You know, hopefully that's a message that, yeah, why should we not start at 50? We should not start. So there's definitely room to debate that. And obviously I have no quorums about going below, but I think overall Housing Production Trust Fund is meeting some of that, you know, 50% level. But when we look at the district overall, that 50% range, that, you know, 0 to 30% range still needs a lot of work. I wish I could find my email that I had the target numbers on there. I just had it, but I can't find it. But I think, you know, when you're cutting up that affordability piece of pie and looking at, you know, maybe what fund is doing what, and overall, you see a little difference in the balance of the numbers. The Housing Production Trust Fund is doing much better, but the overall picture, we still need to work on even the 50% MFI level and down, but definitely 0 to 30%. We need a lot of work. And the more we stake that, as far as I'm concerned, the better.
And I just add that 50% and below is a wildly ambitious goal in a high cost area like this. So I think we're being suitably ambitious and including the very low levels as well. So that's why I'm starting at 50.
I'll call the question.
Second.
Well, are we going to ask for community questions, Randy?
Well, I don't know. There's nobody in the chat. There's nobody in the Q&A. Nobody's raised their hand. So I think there's a Q&A
yeah,
question.
I think we got to affirmatively ask.
Okay. Do you want to answer that?
See, I appreciate the efforts to amend in support of actual affordable housing goals. However, so long as the goals are going to be placed in the hands of developers to achieve, they won't be achieved. What are the plans to create housing without going through full profit developers? Does anyone want to tackle that one?
Let me look at it.
The city has subsidized developers at the wharf to the tune of nearly $300 million. The city can certainly help subsidize those at 30%. I agree.
And I think that another answer is that we're already biting off quite a bit here. As we move into this process, move into it after these recommendations through the small area plan process, in the debate about the comp plan amendments, the issues of how we try to push the process towards these income goals, well, we'll learn about as we're going. Building in more detail in this resolution seems to me a false, would be a false exactitude that we are not prepared to address right now.
Is the answer though to the question what Randy said at the outset, which is we are stating our ambitions, our goals, our desires with respect to affordable housing, recognizing that, as Lisa said, unless you're at 50% or less, we're not talking affordability that will get diversity and equity, and that's what the objective is. But the rubber will meet the road in respect of the details of this in the small area planning process. So what we need to do as a community is move this forward with these goals that we understand to be aspirational, and then take it into the small area planning process where these aspirational goals of the task force become hard goals in the small area plan, where, for example, I would not vote for upzoning unless these numbers are baked into the process by which development can take place. In no way, in shape or form will I vote to upzone the Chevy Chase area corridor unless these numbers are hard numbers in it. Otherwise, I think that it will just lead us down the path of Wisconsin Avenue. So that's where I think we need to move.
Two community questions in the chat. How do we also find ways to ensure that local businesses and small business can afford retail space in what is built?
And can I object to that question, because it's really not within the scope of what we're talking about tonight. We're not talking about small businesses here. We're talking about affordable housing. And that's a topic that's relevant for our discussion about small area plans, but it's not relevant to this discussion tonight. Now, if you want to go ahead and entertain it, that's fine. But I think we need to keep our focus on the recommendations that have been made by the housing group and not divert our attention to other issues.
And we have a forum for it. I mean, we're going smack into the small area plan, and all these issues are going to have to be hashed out. So I don't think it's not like we're putting it off indefinitely.
Peter, you want to take the next two?
And they're where in the chat?
Yeah, Q&A.
Q&A. Okay, you've already addressed the 300 million and the 30%. Isn't this the issue that Randy just addressed? How do you also find ways to ensure local businesses and small business can afford the retail space?
Yeah, we addressed that. It's the one from Mara, Jerry. And just to quickly answer Michelle Wollen's question, will there be more community engagement? Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, we're fighting hard for more community engagement in the small area plan. Why is the chat not? Am I not seeing where these?
It's in the
Q&A, Peter.
Okay, so I tried to address Mara's question. I think the weight of it is that she's advising us or counseling us to focus on nonprofit developers, to add to the details of the specifics of the resolution, the recommendation. And I think that we're on both a political learning curve and a development learning curve here. And as a commission, we're going to have to pursue a lot of these specifics through the small area plan, and then on from there to actually trying to build the political and community consensus for doing a particular project, and then negotiating with whoever is on the other side of the table, whoever does it with us, or for what we can get for a good affordable housing project. So I think that adding more specifics, focusing on only nonprofit developers, we shouldn't do now. We'll pursue that as we pursue this income, this affordability goal. We'll find ways to try to hit that goal, and there in the process we'll pick the best route to get to it. So.
And a question from Jerry Levine: what is meant by a significant number of affordable units? Any particular percentage? Also, a mix of affordable units and higher income limit units might be attractive for both for-profit and nonprofit developers. Would that be permitted under the motion? So under the motion, we do not, Peter, I thought significant, did we leave significant, or I thought that was strict?
That number is in the original motion. It's 50% for recommendation 1, which is the housing above the community center and library. And for the recommendation 2 is 25%, which is on private property. Both of those are still in the recommendation as you have proposed it.
Yes, it should be, but you know, I read it. I didn't read it. I didn't read it in because we're changing the process was not the way I set this up. But yes, the 50% should be in, and I will.
It still is in.
Good.
That's in key action 1.
Right. It's the key actions, and people ask about the key actions before, but that's still there.
I'm sorry, that's my fault. I didn't read it correctly.
And there's no opposition to leaving higher income level units in there. I mean, we're asking for a mix of all income levels and a focus on the lower, because those are the ones that are most unrepresented in development.
Okay, where are we now? Mara has her hand up. Is she being promoted to?
Hang on. Mara, you can talk.
Oh, thank you. I had done that previously when I had posted my question, but
If we can too, let's keep it as brief as we can, because we've got a lot to cover tonight too. Thank you, Mara.
I am. So I'm trying to be brief, Randy. Thank you so much. What I'm trying to understand is if the point of this, and I believe it sounds like there's growing agreement that the goal really is affordable housing and not a developer giveaway, it would seem that it would be crucial to make the point by the ANC as the representative of this neighborhood that that is what we're trying to do, that what is built must be affordable housing. That should be affordable to what Lisa Gore is saying and Peter, to low-income residents. I mean, that's crucial. And if that isn't put in there, then it's going to become just another like little piece of the puzzle or little piece of the pie. There'll be a throwaway of affordable housing, but actually in the end, the density will be for-profit developers and we'll have more luxury housing. That's not what needs to happen here. We need substantive, real affordable housing, and the ANC is in the position to insist that that's what we're standing for and that that's what's going to happen.
And Mara, I think that and this is really my fault that I didn't. The key actions remain, and we take a pretty aggressive goal of saying 50% of the affordable housing and the project we're speaking about in this recommendation should be affordable, and we now define what we mean by affordable with the 50% of MFI or below. So
why not 100%? Why isn't it affordable housing? This area does not need more wealthy or luxury housing. We need to be able to have affordable housing. We need to be able to provide opportunities for families to have diversity. Why not 100% affordable housing? That's what we should be doing here, and we can.
I think the recommendation is to at least 50%, and if there is an opportunity to get funding, which is the key here, if there's funding, it would be greater than that.
Okay. Randy,
it's all dependent on funding.
Could I suggest as a way to, actually, I'm looking at what I understand to be a clean version of the key action plans, and it says goal of 50%. If I'd be happy to take a friendly amendment that says at least 50%.
That's fine with me.
Okay, second. So that's, I've taken that as so Mara, we address it in that way, but look, we're in some sense engaged in a kind of, I mean, we're going to forge our way forward on these projects and learning what money we can raise from the city, from foundations, through social housing, through all sorts of techniques, will determine how close or how much we can exceed the goal of 50% of the units being affordable. But to debate it now seems to me to be, as long as we state an aggressive goal and we state an aggressive goal about affordability, we've gone pretty far. And I think we're being pretty ambitious in the way we've structured this. So.
Thank you,
Let me
Mark.
just ask a procedural question here, though. It's 8:46. Are we just going to continue this meeting until we're done? Is that the consensus of the commission?
I'd advocate that we keep going. I mean, we still have education to go after this.
I realize that, and
I don't think
I'm
to that, but I mean,
at some point it gets unfair to people attending, though. Either way we do it, because if we don't reach the education until 11 or 12 o'clock tonight, then it's going to be, we're just not going to have the participation that we should have.
Yeah. So I don't think we should do education tonight. I think we should try to get this.
We've twice postponed education when we've had people here prepared to talk about it, and I think that's not fair to them. So I object to that, but I also object to going until midnight, because I just don't think that's a satisfactory way for the commission to operate. But if that's the way you guys want to do it, that's what we'll do. I will go with whatever the majority wants to do.
Do you have a proposal that meets the two requirements?
No.
Well, that's
I don't know what to do, because it's a conundrum that I can't resolve at this point. I think I was hopeful that we could just move this along, but obviously we can't. So if we can't, you know, I don't know, but I don't think it's fair to education to postpone that again. And we should have done it at the beginning, probably, if we weren't able to get to, if we were going to take this long with housing. But I'm just not prepared to continue this forever. We need to move on with this process. As I said earlier, this is the first step. Don't think that this is not going to get revisited 1,000 times again. So, Chris?
Yeah, I'm not prepared to go past 10 o'clock at this meeting. I think we need to have a little discipline in this commission. We can't just be going to 12 o'clock every time we have a meeting. It's ridiculous. And you know, we spent a lot more time than we needed to in the beginning part, which we didn't need to do. And I think we just ought to do education later. You know, that's just the way it goes.
Lisa?
You know, I'm going to really don't, I want to choose my words carefully. We need to get through housing, and to do that, the commissioners' questions need to be answered and the community's questions need to be answered. This process on voting on these task force recommendations have been delayed and put off for many reasons, going back to the first commission. So this commission is doing, I think, the best it can to get through these recommendations and to allow the community an opportunity to be heard. And someone has brought up, rightfully so, that, you know, in terms of motion, this is the first time that it's been on the floor, even though these recommendations, which we have crafted into a motion, have been posted on our website since November. This is the first time really that the community is getting ready, you know, being able to offer input prior to us taking a vote. So that's important. Whether we want to call it early or call it, you know, late, I'm good either way. But we need to make sure that everyone is not rushed through the process as we're proceeding. I would agree that I think housing is going to take some time because we have folks on, you know, participants on the call that we have 10 questions in the QA that I think we need to get to. I think we owe that to the community. So I don't think we'll get through education. We probably shouldn't push ourselves through that. And hopefully they will be flexible with us in doing so. But I think we have to take our time and get through these recommendations.
We still haven't even gotten through recommendation 1, and now we've had 2 meetings on recommendation 1.
Well, we were almost getting ready to take a vote, Randy. And I will say, as I said before, as chair, I really think it's up to you to call the question. And, you know, when you feel like people have had enough conversation, cap the conversation and call for the question. That's the only thing that we can do.
Randy?
Yes, John?
Yeah, well, we've had 2 notes from Michael saying, I guess he would accommodate being first on the agenda next time. And if that's okay, I appreciate that indulgence to us on that part. There are some, and the education piece has been updated. So there are things there that just came in very, very recently, which quite frankly, I haven't had time to really explore as much as I would like to. So with the education committee's indulgence, I would suggest we postpone until the next meeting.
Okay, I'll call the question.
I called the question once before and got overruled.
Okay.
But I think
well, one of our calls, well, let's say one of our calls works. So,
well, and what I'm going to suggest is that we're going to keep the Q&A. These questions, again, as I said, these are going to come up repeatedly in the future. This is not the end of the discussion by any means. These recommendations are going to be considered for whatever weight they're given in the small area planning process. And that's a whole separate process. We're going to have another opportunity to discuss that at the ANC. So I don't think it is productive for us to continue to discuss this forever. And because we clearly we could discuss it for another 6 or 7 hours. And there are still going to be comments in the Q&A. So Connie?
I'm just going to say, as we move forward, Peter, if you're going to read out the motions, please read out the key actions, you know, do it all together, because a lot of the questions have to do with that. So if you read it all out and we're clear about it, then let's open it up and let's keep moving.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm taking the sentiment of the commission to keep plowing on the housing recommendations. And Randy, I agree that we need to be as efficient as we can. Democracy isn't efficient. And in many other circumstances, you have been the strong advocate for letting the public speak. And while it is exhausting, these long meetings, I don't think we should ramrod things through or be seen as ramrodding things through. So I think one of us has called the question, and I will, if it's Randy's called the question, I will second it. Can we move to a vote?
Okay, all those in favor of adopting the resolution as on recommendation 1, raise their hand. And I can't see you, Michael. Okay, 7-0. Okay.
Okay, so let me turn to recommendation 2. I move that the commission enact a resolution that reads, the commission advises the district to include as part of the Chevy Chase small area plan process ways to encourage the development of affordable housing and private development along the upper Connecticut Avenue commercial corridor, with a focus on the production of units for households earning 50% and below of median family income, with an action 1 that reads that the commission advises the Office of Planning that as part of the development, the ANC supports the goal of at least 25% affordable housing with a focus on households earning 50% or less of median family income, considering other requirements as well. And let me just say that the original task force report included several other key actions, which I'll be happy to read, but I think that they're being mooted by events or being taken up in other forums, and so they're not necessary. Do you want me to read those?
Yes, please. Are you suggesting that they be omitted?
Yeah.
You drop them entirely?
Drop, yeah.
Well, I will vote against the resolution if that's it, but because the key action items are important. And
Okay, well, let me read them so we can have that. Well, let's see. John or somebody who knows parliamentary procedure, I made a motion. Should I read these or do I read them in?
well, if you're going to make the motion not to include them, then you should make that motion and it can be a second.
Okay, and then you can amend it.
Or I can object.
Okay.
And I will.
Okay. I so move. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay.
So now we're at discussion, Peter.
Yep. So I guess Randy has a comment.
Yeah, I think I don't understand why you would want to eliminate those action items. And the action items are a key part of the whole proposal. And, you know, maybe they are indeed being addressed now, but, you know, I still think they ought to be included.
Well, you know, I would be happy to take a friendly amendment to include them with a couple of language changes. Do you want to offer a friendly amendment?
My friendly amendment is we should include all of the action items that were in the original recommendation as modified by Connie.
Okay, so I will suggest I'm going to try to compose these with one change from what was proposed by Connie, which is I don't think the public knows what the Chevy Chase Gateway is. And
yes, well, that is actually something that was in our comprehensive plan proposal, is in our comprehensive plan resolution. It has been in the testimony that we've given to the council. It has been used repeatedly.
It may be
the Chevy Chase Gateway
or Connecticut Avenue, and
if
I don't see what's wrong
well,
with.
Let me finish, Peter. Let me finish. It's a part of our branding. Are we going to be just upper Connecticut Avenue, or are we going to be the Chevy Chase Gateway? And I think that's an important aspect of this. And we have used that phrase repeatedly over the last year. Now, if the last commission thought that that was an important thing to do, I think it's an important thing to do. Now, if this commission does not want to do that any longer, then you can reject that. But I believe that branding is significant.
I understand what you're saying, and I'd argue on the other side that people who are not steeped in the lore of the ANC and the Office of Planning simply don't quite know what we're talking about, and they do know very well the upper Connecticut Avenue commercial strip or commercial corridor, and using plain English is a real advantage when you're trying to get the public to participate in things like the small area plan. And so that one of the aims throughout our effort to draw up these proposals has been to try to use plain English and get the buzz phrases that residents don't know, aren't familiar with, out of the resolutions.
Well, I don't understand. We're wasting a whole lot of time. You
Yeah,
can
forget it.
No,
Forget
man,
it.
No, Randy, wait 1 second. All you have to do, Peter, is say Chevy Chase Gateway, paren, upper Chevy, you know what? It takes 2 seconds.
Good enough. We'll do it. We'll do it. Okay. So I am going to friendly. Oh, I'm sorry, Connie, you had your hand up.
Yes, I want to support what Randy is saying, because the key actions 2, 3, and 4 matter. especially because I'm going to bring up a proposal for us to host some conversations. And that's part of that mechanism. So I don't want that to be eliminated. And I also think that it's important to include that we really want a charrette. Those things OP is responding to. So in this resolution, we should just have it. It doesn't change the substance.
Okay.
So let's not argue over that.
So in an effort to move us forward, I'm going to suggest a friendly amendment to add 3 more action items, number 2, 3, and 4, that the commission advise the Office of Planning to hold a charrette as part of the small area plan to explore possibilities for development in the Chevy Chase Gateway, Upper Connecticut Avenue Commercial Corridor, Action 3, in coordination with the Chevy Chase Main Street, the Office of Planning, local businesses, property owners, and the Office of the Deputy Mayor for Planning and Economic Development, solicit development proposals for mixed-use buildings along the Chevy Chase Gateway, Upper Connecticut Avenue Commercial Corridor, consistent with opportunities identified in the small area plan, and key action 4, establish a mechanism for the ANC to work on the Chevy Chase Gateway small area plan that focuses on the Upper Connecticut Avenue Commercial Corridor and subsequent implementation. So do you want me to read back the entire motion now?
Oh,
Okay. So that's what's on the floor. Do I understand that correctly? Okay.
yes.
Is there any further discussion? Then why don't we vote?
Well, do we want to have, are there any questions specifically on this?
I'm afraid I don't see it. I mean, I don't see any.
There's one from, I'm just
Some
going through it.
comments.
Mary, yeah, more so, I guess, comments. No one ever asked the community if they wanted to call our neighborhood a gateway. Randy, you come up with that.
Well, if
Or we
you-
ever asked. So you have any background on how that, and I think you did provide some gateway, I mean, background on it.
It's been used repeatedly, as I said, but also the district has gateways that they identify. There's a Georgia Avenue gateway, a Wisconsin Avenue gateway. We thought it was inexcusable that they didn't have a Connecticut Avenue gateway, since we are a very prominent way into the district. So that's the origins of it. It's been in the recommendations that the ANC has made for at least a year.
Okay. Any other questions in the chat or in the Q&A? In the chat. Did Kevin Moshine put something in the chat just now?
Who was that? Oh, see.
Okay. Pat Roth, information sharing is important.
Randy, can you answer this one? Has a Chevy Chase Gateway been adopted by the DC Council or OP?
There are recommendations to them in the comprehensive plan. It's part of the comprehensive plan. And that the council has not acted on the comprehensive plan.
Does anybody want to address Pat Ross' comment in the chat? And then Kevin Moshine did say, please only answer questions in the Q&A, not comments. So we're being advised not to. In any case, I mean, I think we've gone over the issue that Pat Ross raises in her chat comment. So I'd suggest we move the question.
Is there a second?
A second.
Okay.
All those in favor? 7-0, okay?
So that is 2.
I'm sorry, I'm saying, I just gotta say one thing, which is I go on my blank screen because of my hip. I can't stay seated this long. I've got to get up and walk. So I'm listening, I'm just not visible.
Okay.
So I
Okay.
apologize. That doesn't mean that I'm not present. I'm just.
And we'll give you time to get back to get the screen on.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
Oh, Michael.
Okay. So this is recommendation 3. We suggest that, I move that the commission pass a recommendation that reads, the ANC advises the district to preserve and protect affordability of currently affordable rental units and agrees as a commission to study the issue. Do I have a second?
A second.
Do we have discussion?
Do you want to read the 2 key action items underneath that?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yes. Two key action items. 1, that the commission requests that the Office of Planning establish a criteria for identifying, quote, naturally occurring affordable housing. I assume the quote ends there, and determine the amount of such naturally occurring affordable housing in an area. The commission tasked the Standing Committee on Racial and Social Equity to study ways to implement this recommendation. Secondly, the commission, key action 2, the commission requests that the Office of Planning establish protocols for how market rate naturally occurring affordable housing properties can be preserved and protected. The commission tasks the Standing Committee on Racial and Social Equity to study ways to implement this recommendation. Lisa, do you want to comment about what's being referred to the Standing Committee?
Was this the language that was proposed?
No, we proposed just to keep the headline and not take the key action items. But
okay.
The problem here is that there seems to be a strong feeling on the part of Randy and Connie that the key action items be included. So I've just read them as they are in Connie's recommendation. The reason I asked Lisa this is because she has a concern, which I think is a really legitimate concern, that we, over the course of these months, when we disagree, have tended to say we're going to refer stuff to the Standing Committee. And the Standing Committee is going to have a particular duty, a particular task ahead of it. And she doesn't want to lard it up with things that aren't directly appropriate to the issue of looking at equity.
So I'm sorry, Peter. The way Peter read the original motion without the key action item is our proposed amendment, and for the commission to take this on as opposed to the Standing Committee on Racial and Social Equity.
Okay.
And that's how I would like to keep it. I do not necessarily agree that this is something for the Standing Committee to take on. They're not a housing committee. This is an implementation process of housing and trying to figure out these, naturally reoccurring affordable units out there. So we have proposed that the commission actually tackle this one as opposed to key action items 1 and 2.
Okay. So let me suggest so that we have something clean on the table, that we just do a redo here. And I read what you and I, Lisa, proposed, and if you second it, that's on the table. And then if Randy or Connie or others want to go to
because that's what went out to the commissioners.
Right. So that, and it's my fault there. So the motion is that the ANC advises the district to preserve and protect affordability of currently affordable rental units and agrees as a commission to study the issue. And that is the sum total of it. Do I have a second for that?
Second.
Okay. Discussion. Connie, you have your hand up. Randy, am I supposed to be running this, or do you want to run this?
You can run it.
You can run, yeah.
I just want to say that my original language did not include the standing committee. It was when I amended it again, when I revised it again, when we had some conversations about rent control, that I put it to the standing committee. So I'm supportive of keeping it in the commission. I've been supportive of keeping as much as we can in the commission as possible. So I have no objection to that.
Good. Okay.
Are there other commissioner comments or questions?
I will have a comment. The original charge to the task force was to come up with action items. And I don't see this as being an action. I don't know what the ANC is going to do to advise the district. I just don't understand where we go from here with that.
Well, that's an interesting comment. This was the headline motion, which we were debating before. I mean, Connie's read, advise the district to preserve and protect affordability of currently affordable rental units. And then the both key items were that we were requesting things of the city, of the Office of Planning. So there wasn't, nowhere in either Connie's version of this recommendation, nor ours is action by the commission. Save in ours, we do say that we commit the commission to studying this issue.
Yeah, mine is just a comment.
I mean, would you suggest that we drop it all?
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
Randy?
Yeah.
The two key actions make two requests to the Office of Planning. So that would be something of significant activity.
If you want to know the history of this, it went back to the presentations that were made back in October. And at that meeting in October, some of the commissioners on that commission said, we need action items on each of these issues. The housing group went back and again revised its recommendation to include action items. And now this commission is saying, we don't want action items. So that's fine. If that's the way the commission is going to go, I think it is not as helpful going forward. But if that's the way the commission wants to proceed, I'll go along.
Wait a sec. I'm confused. Are we? I must have missed something there. Peter, are you suggesting to take out the key action items? I was just saying we can. We don't have to put it to the standing committee. But are you saying to just remove both of them?
Well, as the motion is now, and as we did a redo on this because of the confusion about this, we removed the action items. But you know, okay. I certainly am willing to entertain a friendly amendment that they be returned, with the exception of referring them to the standing committee in each case. And that I think this is a problem that we've had, that we've tended to think that we're going to send a lot of stuff to the standing committee. And I'm trying to avoid that.
No, that wasn't, I was trying to be clear, Peter. It's not a problem that you're identifying. It was lots of conversation. So it was put to the standing committee because it seemed like we needed that. Okay, so it's not parking issues that we disagree on. It was in, by listening to everyone talk about it, I put that in for people to consider. Right. I don't even, I did it so that we can move forward, but I do not agree with taking out the key action. That is, I'm not for that. I mean, we can call it to question based on your motion, but I'm not going to be for that because there's no action here. I mean, I don't know what we would, I don't know. I mean, the key action has the details.
Yeah, and I think the motion as it stands is not very meaningful because it lacks action items.
Lisa?
I don't find it meaningless. And I think that, you know, the commission can take a look at this a little further and develop its own action items. Just because we don't vote on these particular action items doesn't nullify, what we're trying to do here. Otherwise we could say that the commission adopts these with the exception of referring it to the standing committee. But, if we don't include the action items, that allows an opportunity for the commission to self-develop. It's not a done deal. It, maybe extends our work a little bit, but, it involves the commission more in this decision-making process.
Let me suggest as a way to move us, oh, I'm sorry, Chris.
Chris.
Yeah, I think I agree with you, Peter. I think we can keep the action items in and just remove the last sentence on each one, asking the standing committee to study ways to implement it. I mean, I think the standing committee has plenty to do. And I think the two action items are strong, actually stronger without the last sentence in them.
Okay. So I'm happy to put those back in with the removal of the last sentence. And in effect, what happens here is that we make some requests of the Office of Planning, but the commission takes upon itself the issue of further examination about what to do, whether there is naturally occurring affordable housing and what to do to preserve it. So as a friendly amendment, I would return the first sentence of key action item 1 and 2 in Connie's draft. So do you want me to read those again?
Yes, please.
Okay. The commission requests that this is action item 1. The commission requests that the Office of Planning establish criteria for identifying naturally occurring affordable housing, I think, unquote, and determine the amount of such naturally occurring affordable housing in an area. I think, can I just say, I think in this area? Okay. And then action item 2 would read, the commission requests that the Office of Planning establish protocols for how market rate naturally occurring affordable housing properties can be preserved and protected. So I can read the whole thing all over again, but it is the headline proposal and those two action items. Do we have any further discussion, and do we have discussion from the community?
So there's a couple questions in there regarding the task force versus the standing committee. The task force on racism was initially stood up and was subdivided into 3 committees: education, housing, and mental health. And their task was to provide actionable recommendations to the commission to deal with racial injustice in the area, so Chevy Chase and the district at large. That task force sunset once they gave the commission their recommendations, which are the basis of our motions tonight. And since that task force was sunset, I believe it was our first ANC meeting, motion or resolution was introduced to establish a permanent standing committee on racial and social equity. So that's completely separate from the task force and has a slightly different mission, mainly looking at things through an equity lens, but they will also do some of the implementation of the recommendations from the task force on racism. So just to clarify that, the ANC went through a 45-day volunteer recruitment process. And at the beginning of the meeting, you might remember me saying that that period ended yesterday, and we'll be hosting a interest meeting for them on, I believe, April 8th. So that standing committee will be, operating fairly soon.
Okay, and then the Michelle Wallen thing is a comment. Be clear to the that she does not want the ANC to push for higher density. Are there other comments or questions in the Q&A? Seeing none, I suggest I call the question. Do I have a second for that?
You don't need it.
Okay. All in favor of the motion? Can we see Michael?
7-0.
Okay. So recommendation 4 is unchanged. And Connie, I can read this, or do you want to?
You should read it, Peter.
Okay. I move that the commission adopt recommendation 4, that it advise the district to encourage the council to update the district's rent control law. And this includes an action item that the commission tasks the standing committee to study proposals to extend the coverage of rent control in the context of addressing historic racism, including making the law permanent. Do I have a second?
Second.
Discussion? I'm not seeing. No commissioner comments? Do we have anything in the chat?
No.
Okay. Let's call the question.
Call the question. All in favor?
7-0.
Okay. So recommendation 5. I move that the commission adopt a recommendation that reads that the commission will study ways to include affordable housing in residential areas without disrupting the look and feel of the neighborhood, with the aim of making units affordable for households earning 50% or less of median family income. With 2 action items, the commission tasks the Standing Committee on Racial and Social Equity to study ways to reduce the shortage of affordable housing in the community, especially for low income, 50 to 80% of minimum median family income, and very low income, less than 50% of median family income households. And action item 2, the commission study ways to address the community's concern about the impact of affordable housing in residential areas on existing neighborhoods. Do I have a second for that?
Second.
So let me just explain the motivation for this. Clearly there's this motivation of saying what we mean about affordability, or being clearer about that. And the other aim here is to take out terms of art and use as best as we can get plain English. We hope on a double count this is helpful. One is it avoids the commission committing to things it doesn't understand it's committing to by using terms of art it doesn't fully understand. I guess 3 things. It makes it more accessible to the general public to understand what we're saying. And 3, it opens the gates wider. So for example, with this, it isn't just new construction that we might be looking at. One way to include affordable housing in residential areas might be to, for example, create a land trust and buy existing structures that are already in the fabric of the community, but could, through a change in ownership through a land trust, be made affordable. I'm not proposing that as particular, but it's an example of the sort of things that are could come under the ambit of the language as we proposed it. Is there discussion? Okay. Do we see anything? I'm sorry.
Connie, raise your hand.
I have a point of clarification. I think Lisa said earlier that the Standing Committee on Racial and Social Equity will not have a housing component. Is that true or not? I thought
I didn't say that.
Okay, so I wanted you to clarify what I heard. I might have misheard you. So will it have a housing subcommittee then?
It will be up to them. Per our bylaws, the Standing Committee has the ability to form its own governance structure. So
Correct.
they are, what we will do is ask what type of committees that we need. They'll be able to vote on that and decide what that structure is. But regardless of whether there is a housing component underneath it or not, this is something that, they can and should probably take up.
Okay, so I think the only thing I would say here is that if we are going to put something to the standing committee, and that you have the volunteers and that period ended, that I don't remember, but in the resolution or the bylaws, if there's a need for a member or for them to be able to go to experts or whoever else, people for advice, that they can do
It's
that.
included.
Yep.
It's included.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have further discussion?
Chris?
Yeah, I just want you to know I'm going to vote against this amendment. I've heard from my constituents and they're against upzoning this single-family residential areas in the Chevy Chase, and I'm against it personally. Also, I value the low density, the quiet, the ease of life, the ambience that it's been there for 40 years, and we have lots of diversity in our neighborhood, so I'm against it. So just so you know.
Further discussion? Connie?
Not to Chris's point, but to a different point. In the housing work group, when we had discussions about multifamily zoning, right, multifamily housing, right, changing the zoning, there were a lot of people through the October meeting when we first presented it to the previous commission, as well as the town hall, where people were hoping that their families could live there. So it was not just necessarily based on racial equity, but the hope that that house that they had, if they choose to change it, could have two families, their own families living there, in fact, or have a caretaker live there if it were a two-family house. And so that was part of the consideration of changing it. But that was part of the discussions that we had for the neighborhood.
I just wanted to address, because I've also seen a lot of comments on a listserv where, people comment that we have a lot of diversity, within Chevy Chase. Chevy Chase is 90, I think housing or community did a report. Chevy Chase is 93% white. That's not a lot of diversity.
Okay. Do we have any discussion from the community? There's Libby Murray, who I believe is on the housing work group.
She says, when you look around in Chevy Chase, I find it hard to see that we have lots of racial and social diversity in our neighborhood. And I think statistically that bears proof.
Okay.
Michael?
So I'm sorry, before we vote, Peter, could you just read it one more time? Because I'm not sure that
Yeah, fair enough.
I apologize for not having it in front of me.
The commission study ways to include affordable housing in residential areas without disrupting the look and feel of the neighborhood, with an aim of making units affordable for households earning 50% or less of median family income. With 2 action items, the commission tasks the Standing Committee on Racial and Social Equity to study ways to reduce the shortage of affordable housing in the community, especially for low income, 50 to 80% of median family income, and very low income, less than 80% of median family income households. The second action item is the commission will study ways to address community concerns about the impact of affordable housing in residential areas on existing neighborhoods.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. I'll call the question.
Chris has a question. Hey.
I just want you to know my concern is really about the density. It's not, I mean, I think it would be great if we had more diversity in our neighborhood, but I'm worried about the density. I'm worried about, more traffic on our very narrow streets. I'm worried about the schools, which nobody's gonna, are already overcrowded. I'm worried about the lack of public transportation, which Metro is, if anything, are cutting our bus lines. I just don't see the city responding, and or the city agencies responding to the issues that would arise if our neighborhoods got more crowded. I would welcome more diversity and more income equity. I was hoping we would achieve a lot of that by building more density on Connecticut Avenue. I really don't think we need to build more density throughout the entire community.
Just to address your point, Chris, I mean, I understand the reaction that somehow in this proposal that we're talking about increases in density, but you should note that the proposal, as Lisa and I have worded it, takes the density issue, the phrase, which was in the previous version of the proposal, general density, out. It simply asks that we study ways to include affordable housing in residential areas. And as I say, one way might be the house behind CVS, the CVS parking lot. It's got a buy as is sign on it. If we had a land trust in place today, it would not increase the density of the neighborhood, my single member district at all, if that were made affordable. It's in fact probably would improve the neighborhood because the house is not in great shape now. And I think each of us in our neighborhoods have such structures. I think on Nevada, there's a house that's this way across the street from me. There's one. So I mean, it might, somewhere in the fullness of time, this might lead to greater density. Given if the city keeps growing, we probably will have greater density for that reason alone. But this resolution, these words do not advocate.
I wasn't aware you've taken it out. I mean, there've been so many versions of this.
Well,
every 2 days it's changed, So you take the word general density out, I mean, I'll vote for it.
Okay, that's precisely what's taken out here. I mean, okay.
There are questions. Can you go through the Q&A?
I have to admit, I'm having trouble. Oh, there it is. There's the Q&A. There it is. All right.
A lot of them are comments, and I don't think we need to go over the comments.
Yeah, a lot of them are comments. One we might want to address. I feel this is being rushed and general density needs to be understood by the residents. Please have a discussion about this with more residents so they can be informed prior in order to give feedback. So we might want to kind of have a discussion how this is not the final, and I think Randy has kind of emphasized this. These are our recommendations, but this one is going to our standing committee, and the language on it is to study ways to include affordable housing in residential areas. So we had talked about what that would look like with the standing committee, community feedback. So it's not like these recommendations are the final. It gives the standing committee a basis from what to work from. And we've heard from the community that particularly in this recommendation, there needs to be a lot of community feedback. So I just want to kind of alleviate some of those fears that this is not the end of the process. It's really kind of the beginning. I don't know if any other commissioner wants to add on.
From the beginning in the recommendation from the housing working group, it was always just to study. It was never to do anything more than that.
Right.
So do we want to debate this issue further? I mean, the problem is it was always to study, and then this term of art, general density, and all we're doing here is we're making it more general. And we're doing one other thing, I think, which is that Ron in the chat says that this was not about affordability, this was about inclusion. I think we're focusing this on a little more on affordability. But so certainly, general density could be just, considered in this as well. But are there other questions or comments that you think need to be addressed? Any of you think need to be addressed in the? Okay, I'll call the question.
So Peter, to be clear, so for us to understand and the community to understand, we are voting on a recommendation to further study this issue. Chris's bottom line, I think, at the end of the study period, is if the study recommends gentle density, he's going to vote against it. I've said previously that if the result of this housing task force and the SAP process is that we're going to allow for upzoning without clear governors on what can be built and the like, I will vote against upzoning, because I am not about to upzone our gateway area to private development that doesn't result in the aspirations that we've set forth in recommendation number 1. So my view of this is we as Randy said earlier, we are taking this first step of the process. We are moving it to the next step of the process. The next step of the process will involve an amendment that'll be forthcoming from Randy and Connie, which says our commission will hold community education and consultation meetings that will coincide with the Office of Planning process, so that we can get a fuller understanding of what the community's view of this is before any ultimate vote of the commission to give our blessing or not to development in our community. Do I have that right?
Well, certainly that's how we expect events to go. I mean, I'm not sure. I say nothing. We say nothing in this recommendation about Connie and Randy follow on.
No, I'm talking, Peter, about the process, so that people we have 31 people plus on the call, and I want it to be clear that we are not recommending gentle density. We are not recommending upzoning. We are not recommending development. We are recommending that any development that talks about affordability understands definitionally that affordability is at the 50% and below mark. Everything else is to be determined. And all I'm saying is that stand by, because there will be a more robust process that we have more control over to allow people to participate in ultimate recommendations about what this community will say to the Office of Planning or anyone else that is involved in this process.
Okay. All right. So I want to call.
I'm just asking for confirmation that is.
Well, ultimately, the small area plan will be a piece of legislation that will go to the council. The council will hold hearings. They will hear from the ANC, I hope, and the ANC's views will be given great weight. And then the council will make a decision, will enact legislation. And we're going to have, throughout that process, leading up to that, we're going to be involved. Certainly by the time the small area plan is being considered by OP and whether they're going to recommend it to the council, we'll have a voice then. So there are lots of opportunities along the way when the ANC will look at whatever is being proposed as a small area plan, and we will weigh in, however we want to weigh in.
We're proposing that Connecticut Avenue, we're going to allow Connecticut Avenue to be upzoned. That's what the Office of Planning's proposal is. And we may not allow it quite as much as the Office of Planning is asking for, but I know that for a fact, there's a developer sitting there wants to build something where a Blue 44 is, that building.
Okay, can I suggest, Chris, that I mean we've just done 2 recommendations on Connecticut Avenue. We surely have a lot to talk about when we get back to the small area plan, but right now we're focusing on a recommendation.
Just answering Michael's question.
Yeah. Well, okay. So,
but Chris, are you saying, you seem to be saying it's foregone that the Upper Connecticut Avenue is going to be upzoned?
Yes.
And I'm saying to you, I don't know what the basis for that is. I know what OP would do left to their own devices, but I'm not sure that I know that it is foregone. And my hope is that this process that we're embarking upon tonight, and then through the small area planning process, through the legislative hearings that Randy talked about, will be able to impact whether that is true or not true. I don't accept it as foregone. At least if it was put to a vote to me, I would vote against it.
I think some version of it is foregone. It's not necessarily what Office of Planning is proposing, which is 6-story buildings, but some version of upzoning is going to happen, whether it's 3 stories, 4 stories. That's what the small area plan is all about.
No, the small area plan is about studying what it is that we recommend be done. It's not about rubber stamping, at least in my view, it's not about rubber stamping what OP's desires are. And that's where our involvement and the community's involvement is most integral to this process. It's not accept, as you seem to have, the inevitability of it, but rather to say, we are now embarking on a process that will have our community's voice be heard so that we can come to consensus about what this will look like.
Well, it's my understanding that the mayor endorsed it.
Can I just interject here? Michael, I think, and I say this because I want to set up the conversation that we need to have very shortly, not tonight, but soon, about the small area plan. We have a fight on our hands to be sure that our voice is heard, that we have a full democratic and extended conversation about the development of the Connecticut Avenue corridor. It should be noted that the previous commission passed a resolution, a comp plan resolution that was 2-pronged, and it supported upzoning along the Connecticut Avenue corridor. And then it sought to erect a barrier until we had our planning process completed of the zoning commission not changing the zoning so actual shovels could go into the ground. Now, whether that barrier holds and whether we get a full democratic conversation, those are still issues. That's contested terrain, and we need to have that. We need to have that fight. But Chris is right that there's a lot of pressure towards upzoning on Connecticut. This resolution is not talking about any of that. This resolution says we're talking about whether or not there are ways to include affordable housing in residential areas, off the avenue, back. And it is an open-ended resolution that does just call for study. But it is, so.
We have a community member, Robert.
Yeah, can we have Robert talk and then let's take a vote?
The small area plan is not something, I'm a member of the CAC, and I'm not convinced that the small area plan process is conducive to input from the community. So I wouldn't count that as being the next step for the ANC to move forward. I believe that the ANC has to make a decision for itself about the issues of gentle density and missing middle and those issues, and that may be input to OP and it may be input to the small area plan. But I can tell you I've done a lot of research recently on gentle density. It is not a solution in our neighborhood. It is not a solution to affordability. And this has been studied. You don't have to study it. Brookings Institute has already looked at it. They've done an economic analysis of what you could do by replacing a single family house with a 2-plex and 3-plex and even a 6-unit condominium. And under no circumstances are any of those affordable. So, you're studying and sending it back. It's just going to be more stuff to do. And
Robert,
I'll just leave it at that.
Can I just point out that gentle density, those words do not appear in the resolution as the recommendation as we're talking about voting on it. It's simply a matter of whether we look at whether affordable housing can be put in residential areas. And as the matter of the small area plan, if you believe in democracy, you got to believe that we can fight our way to actually being heard on these subjects. If you don't believe in that, then, okay, so we can just throw in the towel. But I mean, it does seem to me that there's an awful lot of fatalism about the small area plan. And, we just have to turn it around. It's going to be a big effort, but we just have to turn it around. Anyways, my thoughts. Anybody else who we need to hear from? I'd like to call.
Thank you, Robert.
Thank you.
I'd like to call the question. Do I have a second?
I don't need a second.
Okay. All in favor of the motion, raise your hands, please. Okay. Okay. I move the commission enact a resolution or adopt a resolution that reads, the commission tasks the Standing Committee on Racial and Social Equity to study the track record of accessory dwelling units at producing affordable housing, including for households earning 50% or less of median family income. And then a second prong of the recommendation. If the Standing Committee concludes ADUs have a positive affordable housing track record, the commission will examine ways to streamline the permitting, licensing, and zoning process for ADUs, and whether granting subsidies or incentives can promote ADU development with enforceable commitments that the ADU will be rented or sold at affordable rates. Do I have a second?
Second.
Do we have a discussion? Any discussion among commissioners? The community?
Peter,
Yes, I'm sorry. Did I miss?
Peter?
Yes, I'm sorry. John, go ahead.
Yeah, your recommendation basically incorporates the two key actions.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes. You mean from the previous?
From the previous.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that. Thanks.
It does. I mean, it drops some of the about the Boston and Portland and so forth, but yes, it does. Again, do we have any comments or questions in the?
There are some comments, but I don't see any questions.
Okay.
Call the question.
My second. Let me just go. Yes. All in favor of this recommendation? Okay. Okay, and the last recommendation, I move that the commission approve a recommendation that reads, the ANC believes housing choice vouchers should be part of the community's mix of affordable housing development. The commission opposes discriminatory treatment of voucher holders by local landlords or others. The commission calls for voucher holders to be afforded the social and support services they are owed by the district. Do I have a second?
Second.
Discussion?
We got, I think, one person that raised their hand. Hang on a minute. It was on ADUs.
It's on ADUs?
Yeah. I don't see anything, Peter, on this one.
Okay. Can we move to a vote? Call the question. All in favor of the resolution?
Seven zero.
Okay, it's not, it's nine.
Connie has her hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Well,
Okay, now that we have considered all of these recommendations, I'm wondering if there's a place for us in our resolution to state that were we to increase density here, we must have the commitment, okay, of the district to provide the necessary resources that we need, okay, when we include more residents. I mean, we're already overcrowded at the schools, all through the feeder system, as Chris mentioned before. I'm not talking about just I'm not talking about through the community housing through. I'm just saying anything that's along Connecticut Avenue, any kind of increases, we need that support from the district. Okay, we're going to need their support in terms of subsidies. If we build affordable housing, we're going to need their support in not building really high buildings in order to accommodate affordable housing. We're going to have to fight for family size units, all of those things. But on top of that, we really need the district, if they want us to meet some of these goals, to come out and really provide real support and not just say it. They have to do something about it, okay? Because it's not right if they don't. So I don't know where we can put it, but it has to be somewhere in this resolution.
We have a resolution to that effect in
Okay,
our
can we-
comments on the comprehensive plan, which the council
Okay.
has not yet adopted. We reiterated it in our testimony about the comprehensive plan.
Okay.
It really belongs in the comprehensive plan.
Can we reference it then, Randy? Thank you for that.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
That would make me feel better because
Or
this
you-
is
we
not
already-
in any individual, it's not in any individual key action or recommendation. You know, there was no place to put it exactly, but as an overarching, sort of like how we covered community work group, as an overarching principle, I think we have to say that because that is really key for me and for me.
You know, part of the
And
small area plan process. I mean, I think
yeah, I'm definitely going to raise it
I don't
there
think it
for
would-
sure. It has to be, but I think because housing means it's development. So I think it should go here as a call out, you know, and we can reference all of the other statements that were made in the past. That's fine. But to make it
Do you have
again.
a specific, I mean, so this is another recommendation we'd vote on. This is.
That's a vote on. We're going to start all over again.
No,
No,
I don't mean
no.
that. I don't mean that. I don't necessarily mean that. I'm saying, where can we put this language when we write up this resolution? It's going to go into public, right? That we voted on it and we have resolutions now. We're done. We're done with housing. And I'm saying in the language in which we introduce it, I think we should have some kind of paragraph that says we would like the district support if anything goes forward. I mean, real support. I welcome anyone's advice on that or who can contribute to that.
I would do a
I'm
resolution.
just raising it as an issue that's very
We can do
important.
it, because we can vote on it next meeting, resolution number 8 on the
Well,
housing.
I would not make it resolution number 8. I would just make it a separate accompanying resolution or statement of policy related to the conclusion of the housing section. It's really not quite procedurally in order to tack on number 8.
No,
It should
right.
be a
I don't want
separate
to do that.
statement. Should be a separate statement. And
Individually.
you could compose it and then we'll just vote on it next time. And
Okay, can you help me, John, then to do that, and then I can raise it next time.
And we still have some of these housing recommendations going through the standing committee. So we still have other work to be done on this. So it's not like we're going to have a resolution for all these at the next meeting.
Can I ask that, Peter, you prepare a compilation of all of these so that we can put it on our website and reference it in the future so that we have a clean version of all 7 recommendations?
Yep, I'll do that.
Okay.
And as soon as I finish the Zoom table of contents tomorrow.
Okay.
And Peter, we should probably work together and include community because we don't have community compilation up there
Right.
as well.
Okay.
We should do that.
Okay.
And they should just be as clean as possible.
Yeah, I understand. So you're taking back the gavel, Randy?
Yes, I will.
Yeah.
Okay, and we're gonna postpone the education. I apologize to the education work group once again. I had hoped we really had a chance of getting through that tonight. This is not a case of bait and switch. I really expected to be able to do that. Okay, we need to go through the commission business. The minutes of our meeting on March 8th have been circulated to the commissioners. Some commissioners made some changes, suggested changes that I think have been incorporated. Any other changes to be made to the March 8th minutes? I move that we adopt the March 8th minutes. A second. All those in favor? 7-0. Okay, John, do we have any checks for this meeting?
No, we have one outstanding for you, I think.
Yeah, but that we approved it at our last meeting, so we don't need to do anything with
So
that.
we had nothing at this point.
Right. Okay, so possible items for next meeting. We'll hopefully go to education early in the meeting next time, so we can try to get through that. We're still hoping to have a presentation from the deputy mayor or department head on the mayor's budget process. I don't think we're likely to get that, however, because they are now telling me that they're not going to have anything until after the mayor submits the budget on April 22nd, which is really too late. But Peter, did you have something?
I just wanted to say, I hope if not before April 12th, we put something on the agenda to talk about the small area plan, Connie's proposal, but also the proposal about whether we can become more involved and get more ownership of it. And it's a struggle to try to get this going in the right direction and in a magnitude that I think is the community deserves and expects.
I hadn't gotten to the end of my list, but yes, you're right.
Sorry, I was just looking at it. Okay, I'm sorry.
It's not on the written list because it came in later.
Okay.
But it is on my list. Okay, and then we may, depending on the schedule for the budget hearings, I don't think we're going to have a testimony on anything that comes up before our April, whatever the 27th meeting or 26th meeting, April 26th. But if there is anything, then we would have to address it at our April 12th meeting. And just as a forewarning, I mean, the budget season is coming up and we are undoubtedly going to have some things that we would want to tell the council about the budget once it comes out.
Including
anything else?
More money for the small area plan to extend the process.
Well,
you really meant that. I mean, you know.
That would be something I think would be appropriate for us to raise. Anything else for that meeting?
So I would like to be able to raise my my resolution on hosting conversations, and I will work with everyone on doing that to have the right language. But that's very important that we can lead those. We can just start and not delay.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else, Lisa?
I want to address a question that came up in the chat because I believe we talked about this informally, but Ronald brought up, if possible, it might be useful for our impactful resolution to be surveyed to show degree of support among 3G residents. I talked to another commission, 3C, and they had a resolution that they posted, I think maybe 30 days, I'm not sure the amount, but they posted ahead of the ANC meeting. Has ANC 3G ever discussed that? And I just kind of want to see what the opinion of the commissioners is regarding possibly posting resolutions in advance and giving the community an opportunity to weigh in on them. We have done that.
We have done that on a number of occasions, not recently.
Okay.
And the reason was because I mean, if we can get resolutions prepared in enough time so that we can post them in advance, I mean, that was the whole purpose of doing the recommendations for the housing group and the education group and the community group. All of that was designed for exactly that purpose. Now, things come in at the last minute, and we haven't been able to plan that far in advance. But yes, we ought to be doing that.
So can we try to, does the commission object that we try to do that? I'm going to be meeting with Stephanie on the website. We could probably do something with Google Forms. I can call 3C and work with the commissioner that I talked with to see how they do it. You don't have to reinvent the wheel, but maybe give a 2-week community comment period. You know, at least one meeting out, and then we could, you know, at least give them more opportunity for input.
For things that have enough lead time, I think we should do that. I mean, we've run into a lot of things in this first 3 months of this year that we simply did not have that kind of lead time.
Okay.
And, you know, I'd love to be able to do that. But for instance, the resolution that we had on the Lafayette going to Military Road School, there was no way we could do that.
Mhm.
And I mean, there are just lots of things like that, or they're going to come up inevitably, and we cannot promise that we're always going to give 2 weeks notice. I'd love to be able to do that. Unfortunately, the world goes faster than that.
Yeah.
It really does.
Well, I mean, even if we don't meet the 2-week deadline, we just committed that, you know, things shouldn't come to the ANC 24 hours prior to.
Yep.
So even if it's posted on Friday and we, you know, sit it out there and put it out on
Yep.
social media.
I'd love to do that.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else? We can adjourn at 10:02.
Are we at we at the halfway point now?
Yeah.
Just about.
Yeah.
Just
Keep
about.
walking, Michael. Keep walking.
Yeah. Just stand up for a little bit and we'll keep going.
Good.
So Randy, before you before you close the meeting out, let's just make sure that Stephanie has captured all the Q&As. There were a lot, even though some of them were comments. She captures both the chat and the Q&A, and we should have that.
Okay. I will.
So, I mean, you could end
Leave
it, but make sure she can stay on and just, or she can tell us.
Well, I
she's
can't
done it.
end
She
it
does it
then.
she does it pretty fast, and
Okay.
and she's
She's
still on.
still on, so.
Yeah, she said just 1 minute. She texted.
Yeah.
I texted her. She goes 1 more minute.
Okay. All of you can leave and I'll stay on. That's fine.
Thank you, Randy.
Okay.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
So Randy, you have to ask your Jewish wife to explain to you in more detail the historical significance of oy vey.
Oh, I know it very well. Believe me. I can pass, Michael. Don't worry.
All right.
I wear a yarmulke really, really well.
Yeah.
Bye, guys.
But oy vey indeed, huh?
Yes.
It's something.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think we're done. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Michael. How's your hip doing?
You know, it's 1 week, and I guess for 1 week it's doing fine, but you
Yeah.
know, I'm not ready to celebrate yet.
Yeah. Well, everybody has told me that doing the physical therapy is really important. And if you get that done, you know, it does recover pretty well.
Well, in fact, during this meeting, I hit one of the points at which I had to go on,
Right.
you know, no camera so that I could do these squats and stuff like that.
Right. Good. Okay.
All right.
Good luck.
Well, we made a little progress, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. That's all I can ask for, I guess.
Can I ask you one quick question, which is the last commission approved something that Chris was talking about upzoning. Is
Yeah,
this
by the way, we still have participants on the,
right,
some
but
attendees.
It's right. Is this commission bound by that, or is that part of a?
We could
ongoing
change it.
process?
We can change it.
Okay, because
Yep.
I'd like to when the time is appropriate, I'd like to look at what was recommended or approved.
Okay. Yeah, it's
see what-
all on the website. It's
Yeah,
all on the website.
No, I mean, as a collective, to see
Oh.
whether it's consistent with our current views. Because
Yeah.
we have five new people.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you.